Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Break the Rules. I'm Lev Polyakov, and we are here today with Gnostic Informant, my good friend Neil, always a pleasure, and Donnie Discerned, formerly known as Donnie Darkened, with the creepy-looking Donald Trump avatar with the flashing red eyes. We were on before talking about whether Donald Trump is the Antichrist. We are going to continue this conversation in light of new events. As always, gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to be here with you guys. And I would want to also thank everybody who's watching this right now. And don't forget that if you like the show, want to support the show, add a like, share this to all your friends, and don't forget to subscribe, and also patreon.com/breaktherules. That's where all the magic happens. So anyway, let's start with Donnie. For those who don't know, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your current spiritual journey, and what it is, in short, that you're seeing right now going on with Donald Trump, who is, from the recent letters that we got in connection to Epstein, the two Epstein brothers are talking about how he was, to say it in YouTube-friendly terms, playing Bill Clinton's saxophone. Now, to me, that doesn't really make for that good of a antichrist-like figure, but I could be wrong. So, Donnie, let the good people know also what you think about that whole Epstein situation on top of everything else. So you have the floor, and then we're going to go to the wonderful Neil.
Yeah, just a quick introduction. I'm Donnie. You can find me on X. I talk about end times eschatology. I talk about how I think we're living in the end times now, and there's it's obviously up for debate and whatever, but that's mainly what I talk about. I also talk about how I think that Donald Trump could be the biblical antichrist, most likely figure. There's lots to talk about and debate and discuss about there as well. And we'll get more into, I guess, that during the show. But I guess I'll let Gnostic kind of introduce himself then first, and then
Go for it.
Gnostic Informant. I've been on here before, so I just make videos about ancient history, mythology, and the Bible, paganism, philosophy, stuff like that. You invited me to come on, and I want to hear some arguments for the Antichrist. I want to check this out.
But before the Antichrist, I also want to, once again, find out what exactly you think is going on with Epstein and Trump in relation to, I don't know if you were following these recent letters that have come out. And the other guy, who I think was Jeffrey Epstein's brother, he says, no, it's a different Bubba I was talking about in this email relating to allegedly Vladimir Putin having the evidence that Trump was doing a certain ritual with Bill Clinton, which doesn't mean that they happen to like guys. It could just be one of those Yale things, to quote the great American Psycho. So I don't know what exactly you think is going on here, Donnie, but let us know, and then we're going to get into the Antichrist and also the Second Coming.
Yeah, I mean, with the Epstein stuff, I really don't have too much to say on that. I mean, I followed it a little. I followed it a little bit, not like super duper closely. I mean, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if Trump was like deeply tied with Epstein and all these guys, because he clearly was. I mean, friends with him, but I don't know exactly to what extent all of the allegations are true. I mean, I don't really have too much to say other than I guess let's see what comes out from, if anything, what comes out from the declassification of the Epstein files. I think Trump just signed to release some form of the files. Not really sure exactly if we'll see any kind of disclosure there, but
The fact that it hasn't been out yet and we're still waiting means there's something going on, where there's something behind the scenes, some secret government program. This is just my speculation right now. Mm-hmm. Some secret government program where some of this stuff just can't get out. That's my opinion. I don't think we're going to see everything.
Yeah. Not before Bill Clinton buys the farm.
Be real. Do you honestly think a government that this serious of a situation is just going to go, yeah, we're going to be transparent. Good. Let's do it. Let's tear the whole system down. Especially after the way Mike Johnson responded to the Senate hearing when he walked out. Did you see that clip? And they're like, he looked all shaken up, and they're like, well, what's up? You think Trump's going to sign off on this? And he said, I thought there'd be some amendments to this. And the interviewer was like, yeah, so what? he said this might actually affect the entire political system. And then he just walked up the stairs and just walked away. And I'm just thinking to myself, that's your response? That's the worst response I've ever heard. That's the craziest thing ever.
Well, real quick, here's what I think is going on. I don't think it's a coincidence that this whole Epstein stuff started to get supercharged around what time? Around the time that Trump started to be friendlier towards Ukraine and started to give the go-ahead that Ukraine could fire into Russia. Because when you think about what that email...
And
Venezuela as well. Oh, Venezuela.
There's all these little wars going on, and all of a sudden everyone's focused on Epstein. I thought about that too. So is this all just a big freaking smoke and mirrors thing to keep everyone from looking at other things?
No. That's not what I think it is. I think that it's directly connected with these wars. Venezuela is also connected with Russia and China and Iran, all these places. Because if Trump oversteps his bounds, then if the Russians do actually have some kind of serious compromise on him, this was their way of putting the brakes on whatever Trump was maybe trying to do in regards to these various wars that are going on right now. Because it started exactly at the time when favorability towards Ukraine from Trump's administration started to shift. He started allowing more missiles in. He started allowing them to fire into targets inside of Russia, something that Biden's administration did not want Ukraine to do. So at least to me, it's very interesting, the timing of this, how it just happens to happen around that time that the Epstein stuff started to build up. And with every new, let's say, with every new allowance that Trump gave towards Ukraine, the Epstein stuff started heating up once again. So I don't know, maybe I'm too much of a Ukraine tinfoil hatter, but it seems very related to me if we take what was in those emails to be true in regards to that Trump-Bill Clinton compromise, which also, by the way, if you think about it, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and like all those people, they would never in their life want that to come out. How would that make their whole family look? You know, even if he, by the way, even if he was the suckee as opposed to the sucker, it's still not a great look.
Yeah. But what's so crazy about all of this is we were being gaslit by the FBI, by Trump himself, that there was nothing left. It was all done. There was all nothing. And then now we find out there is more.
Yeah.
So just that on its face is insane, because some of these MAGA people on Twitter are still pushing, Trump's playing 4G chess. He wanted the Epstein files to come out. This is his way of making him get
trust the plan.
Yeah. And they're still, it's like, dude, are we in the first batch? I don't know if you guys read the first batch. I'm such a weirdo that I actually went through and read it. Trump was in them, and it was not good. And hardly anyone talked about this. It just, for years, barely anyone even cared that in the first batch of the Epstein files, the ones that weren't redacted, so imagine what is redacted. The ones that weren't redacted, you have Epstein, it's like some sort of transcript. I don't know how they have this, but this is written out like a transcript. And Epstein was on his private plane heading to New York City, to JFK. And there was all this weather problems. And all of a sudden, the pilot was like, hey, we can't land in JFK. Weather problems. The closest airport is Atlantic City. And his first response to Atlantic City was, yeah, let's go to Atlantic City. We can meet up with Trump then. And I'm just thinking, that's his response to going to Atlantic City is, I get to meet up with my buddy Trump there. And then people think that there's not that doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it does. Think about that. That's his first response to Atlantic City is Donald Trump. Anyways.
Yeah, so it's crazy. I don't know. We're going to get to the Antichrist part right now, but it does kind of beg the question. If this guy's been involved in all these illicit things, it's not necessarily somebody who is this heroic-looking peacekeeper that everybody is raving about. At least right now, it seems like his popularity is quite waning. So I don't know, Donnie, would you say that may put kind of a dent in him being the Antichrist? So I don't know.
So here's kind of something I've been thinking about. I think that, you know, when you look at a lot of Donald Trump's like early life, you know, he is in that kind of scene where he almost is like kind of like proud of it. Like, I don't know if you saw that one clip where it was basically he was about to get on an escalator at his Trump Tower, and he's talking to this 10-year-old girl, and he's like, I'll be dating her in 10 years. right? Did you see that clip? And then
Yeah.
like people kind of laugh it off or whatever. But
Mhm.
like that's kind of seems like Trump's character, right?
Yeah.
Now here's kind of what I think. Um I think that if it does come out that Trump is in these files in a way that's like really bad, like I could see a situation where, all Trump would basically have to do is sort of appeal to the greater masses in a way where, people feel like Trump is letting them down, because he's not they say that he's, Israel first or whatever the case is, right? And I think that personally, I think that if it came out that he was in the files, I think that it's very possible that all he would need to do is flip on Israel and actually gain his credibility back with people. Because, like I said, before, people see Trump as a battering ram. They
Mhm.
don't really see him necessarily as like this ideologue that we need to like follow, but like
Right.
they see
That's
him as
true.
a weapon to use against the system, right? And I think that would be, what more beast? How much more beastly can you get than to use, the most depraved thing as a weapon for your
Mm.
cause, right?
So
There could be
what you're
something.
saying is that it's kind of like Nick Fuentes, for instance. The Groypers, I'm sure they know about Catboy Cammy and all of these
Mm,
bisexual intrigues, yet at the same time, they still see him as a battering ram to the system type figure. Would you say there may be a similar thing with Donald Trump if, for example, it does come out that he has had, a homosexual encounter with Bill Clinton, among other people potentially?
yeah, I could definitely see that being the case where like some really bad stuff comes out about Trump, and then because right now Trump is sort of just doing what he thinks is the right thing to do, and it's becoming very clear that a lot of people are turning against the direction he's on. But I think if something very bad to come out and he changed course, I bet you we could see like shift like a big shift on like perception of him, especially in like the right wing circles. And I think that would be like the best illustration of like being beastly, right? Like
Hmm.
you know.
Well, Neil, would you think that the boomers will be okay with the bisexuality? Let's say that's the nadir. That's the real mystery here that ends up being uncovered. I'd understand the Groypers, they grew up with iPads, with the internet. They may actually be a little bit more tolerant towards things of that nature. But the boomers, if the boomers actually found out about it, it'll be worse than when the Italians found out about Marlon Brando when they saw that picture of him sucking a big one. So I don't know, Neil. What do you think? Would the boomers take that sitting down? Their
Well, look,
man
the
Trump.
boomers didn't handle Bill Clinton pretty well in the '90s. So I can only, yeah, I guess we already know how they're going to act. We already saw it.
Wait, you
This
mean
guy,
that?
and look,
Yeah.
I'm not a Democrat. I'm not doing any like, I'm not a Democrat, but like Bill Clinton was kicking ass. Like the economy was in the surplus for the
Yes.
first time ever. And like he was kind of a conservative though. It was weird. He was like a blue dog Democrat. So he got everyone to like him. He wasn't like a far leftist. He was like a center leftist, kind of conservative tax cut guy, blue dog Democrat.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he's killing it. He's absolutely destroying it. Everyone loves him. He's a saxophone playing dude, smooth guy. And then he gets blown in the White House, and then everyone hates him. That was it. That's how the boom. So that was the boomer era. That was
Yeah.
there. So we know how they're going to act. We know they're not going to take it.
And that was, by the way, heterosexual. Imagine
Right.
it happens, the
Right.
reverse. Imagine
Yeah.
if Bill Clinton was sucking Al Gore's dick in the White House,
It's over.
Like,
It's over.
yeah, so I don't know, Donnie, that's kind of a counter, but we do have a super chat over here. By the way, guys, sneed those super chats from Deadpool Kid 12, $10. Thank you so much. Now, I don't know if it says this, but didn't scripture say that the Antichrist will perform miracles like return from the dead and not get nipped by the ear? Also, there's kind of a good percent hating Donald Trump.
Yeah, so there is Revelation 13 talks about the beast receiving the deadly wound, and that's been interpreted many different ways. Personally, I think I don't like you could say that it's not literal and say that, oh well, the wound could be the loss of power, or the loss of authority and the regaining of it, and that's a fair interpretation. But I tend to lean on a literal interpretation of him receiving a literal physical deadly wound and literally returning from the dead in some capacity. No, I don't think that his assassination attempt was the fulfillment of the deadly wound, although I think that it could have been like almost like a foreshadow, right? And make no mistake, like the people on the left definitely want him dead. I don't want to wish that, I'm not, this isn't wishful thinking or like, anything like that. But, I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't the only attempt on his life in some way. But yeah, I don't think that it was fulfilled, that was something that was fulfilled during the assassination attempt or anything like that.
There is also a comment over here from my friend Gaudier. Revelation is also written in terrible Greek, but that's a different issue. Is that true, Neil?
Yeah. It's very, very, very bad Greek. Very bad Greek.
Wait, so how does that work? Why would it be written in bad Greek?
The grammar is very, very low tier. It's not written by someone it's not like Attic. It's not like really good. Like it's not like Plato's Greek or anything.
Okay, but does that matter? So does it matter that
that's why I said this is a different story.
Yeah, it is. But at the same time, it does make one think that if we're talking about these big texts that are supposed to be talking about the future and like a very historical important thing, does it matter whether that is written in good Greek or bad Greek, or don't blame the messenger, I guess, so it doesn't really matter?
Well, I guess from a Christian perspective, it's a good thing because it just shows you that this is more authentic, that some guy who's not as educated wrote this with the help, maybe a help of a scribe helped him out or something. But like you can see, it's not like a well done. It's just like someone kind of wrote this together with a lot of knowledge of Daniel and like Zechariah is another one. Whoever wrote it was knowledgeable of Judaism very much. But the Greek was a little. It might have been someone who was like a Syriac Greek or something, like Syrian or something.
So what we can take off the table, I guess, if we're talking about the inspiration for Revelation, we can take off the table this being dictated through some telepathic means by an angel or a demon or whatever. Because if that was the case, surely then it would be written in the most beautiful, eloquent way, wouldn't it? Because if you were
that's an interesting point. Yeah, I haven't thought about that.
We could take that right off the table then and say that maybe he saw somebody who was like mumbling something and then he quickly, wrote it down.
It's
and,
not that bad. It's like it's not like it's like spelling problems or anything. It's just not like fluent. It's not like elegant Plato or Aristotle or something. It's just like very common Greek, very common, very very low tier.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah,
very basic. Very basic.
Going back to Trump here. So just to break down what's supposed to happen right now. So Trump is in the slump. We got word from Neil that the boomers are not going to be happy with anything approaching going away from heterosexuality. I think that when they saw the YMCA dance, they were just, able to have that pass right through them, paid that no attention, because God forbid something like that comes out. So Donnie, in light of that, where do you see Donald going next? Because if this is revealed, like Neil said, the boomers ain't happy, what happens then?
I think the boomers will follow him to the grave, because I feel like the boomers kind of see their last hope in Trump. You know what I mean? And
yeah, they'll listen to whatever defense he has. That's for sure.
That's for sure, at least, right? And he'll have one. So
I think the way I would respond to that is, in theory, the boomers would be appalled, but in practice, Donald Trump is just going to tell them something. This is all a hoax, and then they're just going to go, yes, it is a hoax. All right, next post, and they're just going to keep going. That's how he's been doing it. That's what he's been doing. So
that is true. You see, I forget. Like you could just lie. You could just lie, and it's okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's say he lies. People move on. Now what happens? You were talking about Israel. You were talking about how Donald Trump is going to now go away from Israel. But what would that actually look like? Because in terms of stability in the Middle East and the allies and all of that, we have currently allies with who we have Saudi Arabia. We have, the Emirates. We, unfortunately, even if those aren't great, Qatar, that really seems to be the worst one. And a lot of these, like especially Saudi, are just like a bunch of... I remember some comics said, I really like the way they said it, how it's run by 12-year-old boys. Like, what would a 12-year-old boy want to do if they controlled everything? They'd invite like Beyonce over and like celebrities. They get all these like really super expensive cars to race around. Like, that seems to be the mentality of the ruling class of these desert nations. And then there's Israel, and then there's like Egypt. And what exactly would a Middle East, where Israel becomes this total pariah state, where the United States is not helping it anymore, what exactly does the geopolitical reality here look like? Because it almost seems like we're so tied to the hip that if Trump were to try to do something here to, get away from Israel, like, I don't know, like, how do you see it working out?
Well, okay, so I've been talking about this for a couple of years now, where, if you look at what Trump it appears to be trying to do in the Middle East, is essentially he wants to, and across the world, from what he says, that he wants to end all the wars. Like, he's trying to end, Russia, Ukraine. He's trying to end, the Middle East thing. And it's interesting, if you actually go back like 40 years ago, like, he's been trying to do this like since like I think it was like the 1980s. Yeah, 1983. There was have you seen that, Neil, where he posed with the picture of the dove, and he was shot by William Coupon, and Coupon said that he was trying to, at the time, he was trying to become the peace negotiator for the Middle East, and that was like 40 years ago. So this is something clearly that's been on his mind, at least for decades. And I don't think Trump. One thing about Trump is, Trump wants to have control, right? Like, whatever control other players may think they have or may have at the time. I think Trump ultimately wants to be the guy who kind of oversees things, like the Board of Peace. Like, you guys have seen like how Trump is now like starting this whole Board of Peace with like I think what were the countries like Saudi Arabia, I think is like one of them.
Yeah, the Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia, and I believe Egypt. UAE,
yeah. And what's interesting is, like, I think that could very well turn into like what Revelation talks about the beast and the 10 kings, right? Because if he is the beast, then he has to have a 10 king coalition of nations, right?
Yeah.
That sort of like follow his kind of agenda. And I think that that could very well be like this whole Board of Peace thing. They're gonna have some sort of say over what happens with I think with Gaza, no, right?
And what's interesting about what
West
you just said is that in the Sibylline oracles, the ones that were written in like the 15th, 16th century, there is a passage about Muhammad having like 10 different Arab kingdoms that were like beneath him, and they called him the Antichrist because he had the 10. It was like they were matching up Revelation's 10 kings to him. And then they also said that the word Muhammad, the word Baphomet, was a corruption of the word Muhammad, Baphomet. That's how you get there. It's like 2 steps away. So that the sort of archetype fit onto Muhammad in this period of time. And then there's another one somewhere, also the Sibylline oracles, I think, but I know there's another one from an earlier time where the Gog and Magog was Goth and Magoth, which were the 2 Gothic Visigoths and Ostrogoths taking over. The fall of Rome that was it. That was the apocalypse in some of the minds of these 5th century Christians. They thought that was going to be the end of the world. So I mean,
that was kind of the template for it too. Well, I could definitely see why they would think that, is because it certainly did follow the template of like sort of biblical events, especially in light of like judgment coming down on Jerusalem.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely
you got the fall of Rome, fall of Constantinople, and then another one was obviously Jerusalem in the time of the Crusaders. It's another big one.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So then, what exactly does that mean regarding where Israel is going to be?
Well, I think, right now we're definitely seeing all of the nations definitely like position themselves away from Israel or anything like that. I think that the growing consensus is that Israel needs to be something needs to be done to stop Israel, or that Israel needs to be stopped to some degree.
The one Jewish nation out of a sea of all Islamic nations. That's the one that needs to be put a stop to.
Right.
I actually found it. You want to hear the Muhammad thing?
Go for it.
You found it? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So this is from the Sibylline Oracles, later, obviously. And first it has a passage from Irenaeus, so it's going back to the 3rd century real quick. And it says, "The Antichrist shall be the servant and make himself a king unjustly, contrary to law. As an apostate, he shall be very wicked, a manslayer, a thief. He will promote a diabolical apostasy. He shall destroy the Gentile idols and set up himself as an idol or false god. And by him men may serve the devil. He is called the son of perdition, the man of sin, who shall, as the apostle says, extol himself above that is called God or worshipped. And that in the temple of God at Jerusalem, showing himself as God," and there's a bunch of Latin shit. And then it says, "Antichrist must not appear till after the 10 kings, and he is the little horn in Daniel, which must destroy 3 of the 10 horns. He will make war with the saints and speak words against the Most High, change times and law, reign 3 years and a half." And then it goes back to present day. It says, "The history of Muhammad shows that he is the Antichrist described by Irenaeus. Number 1, Muhammad was the servant to a merchant at Mecca and made himself king to rhinoceros." Has a little, it means little horn. I'm sorry. Okay. The little horn, that's a Latin word. Okay, cool. "And is a beast of Arabia. And thereby the rife of the Saracen Empire is described in that country, which space of 100 years conquered Egypt, Syria, Arabia, Persia, Armenia, Africa, Spain. The 3 kings conquered by the Saracens are the Persians, Gothic kings, and Spain." That actually did happen. "And the Eastern emperor's dominions in Syria, Egypt, Africa, and some parts of Asia Minor. The soldiers of Heraclius, Emperor Heraclius, the Christian emperor, revolted to Muhammad in Arabia, and thus he became a prince there. Number 2, Muhammad was a homicide and a thief. His government was tyrannical. He forced all to receive his religion. He forced or become tribunaries. He promoted his new religion by the sword and forced many to apostatize from Christianity. Number 3, and this is the last one. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. Muhammad promoted the diabolical apostasy from Christ, by which he served the devil. He helped in the composing of the Jacobite Christian, interesting, a Nestorian monk, and a Jew. And then he gave the new rule of faith and pretended to be inspired by the angel Gabriel in his epileptic fits. Damn. I just want to see what he said about the 10 kings, though. I don't know what they.
So he was saying about how there's 10 kings.
The 10 tribes of the Arabs. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, go ahead. What were you saying?
Oh, about like the be subduing 3 of the 10 kings, essentially, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He said the 10 kings were the Arabs, and he said the 3 kings that he conquered were those other 3 pieces. Yeah.
Interesting. So if Muhammad were to be the Antichrist, would the Antichrist saga extend all the way from the Middle Ages to now? Like, could it still keep going, or would that be against the revelation?
Oh, well, there's I think that there's always an I think there's an Antichrist for like each generation, right? Like
that's what John says in 1 John 2:18. When he says, now this is where I have a problem with this, because he literally says paideia. He says escate hora esti, which is children. This is the last hour. He doesn't say 2,000 years from now it's the last hour.
Oh yeah, I could explain.
But before you do, I'll just finish this point.
Yeah.
But then he does say, to be fair, as you heard, many antichrists have already come. So there is this idea of more than one antichrist.
Yes,
that is definitely biblically sound.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Like in Daniel, we see like Antiochus Epiphanes, who like sort of laid the framework for the beast, the Antichrist, what sort of role that the Antichrist plays. And, all throughout Scripture, the Antichrist or the beast plays the role as a wicked Gentile king and kingdom raised up by God to deliver judgment and discipline on Judah / Israel / Jerusalem. Who has, played the harlot or become apostate or, has rebelled into disobedience, so on and so forth. Now about the last hour thing. So from a biblical perspective, we have been in the quote unquote last days since the ascension of Christ. And,
So the last days are double the time of the first and second temple combined.
Well, so it would be it's the age, right? So we're in the age of the Gentiles, right? And this is considered the last days. And if you look in First Peter, it talks about how to the Lord a day is like 1,000 years, right? Yeah. So what is like 2,000 years from like, let's say, a human perspective would be like 2 days, would be like basically like a road trip.
Yeah, it's like a Brahma's year in Hinduism, but surely Jesus Christ should have kind of told his apostles, hey guys, like when I say like right now, I actually mean like 2,000 years, just so everybody's on the same page about this business.
Yeah, because I like I said, it's still double the amount of time from David down to Jesus. We're doubling that now.
Well, it kind of lines up actually, because I don't know if you've looked at Hosea 6, and there's so many other passages in the Old Testament that sort of foreshadow this 2-day or 2,000 year time period between the Messiah's first and second coming. There's a lot actually in there like that sort of alludes to or foreshadows that points to that 2-day gap. And there's a lot of stuff that I talk about when it comes to like eschatology. Like I talk about like this film called Messiah 2030 that kind of breaks down a lot of that stuff and posits that that we are right on the edge of like we are about to enter the 6th day or biblical year 6,000. Right, or sorry, it would be and that's when Christ returns, like it's gonna line up with like the creation days, like how God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th, and that essentially that if you take an overview of the biblical chronology, it's very much lined up with those those 6 days or 6,000 years of human history, followed by the 7th day of rest, or the 7th the Sabbath millennial day, which would be the millennial kingdom. So there's a lot that goes into that. I mean, this is like
So you're saying that the creation epic in Genesis is sort of like a foreshadowing the 7,000 years of our existence.
Yes.
Never heard that yet. That's good. That's interesting.
Oh yeah. It's pretty interesting. You brought up Irenaeus. Irenaeus actually goes into a lot about this. There's a couple early church fathers that talk about this a lot. That would actually be a really interesting topic for maybe another time. But
Irenaeus did have a predicted date. I think it was like 400 or something at the end of the world. So that would be in his mind. It wouldn't be 6,000 years. It'd be before that. I'm pretty sure.
Did he have a predicted day?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it.
I know he thought that the time was close.
Yeah. Oh, they all no. There's no Christian.
There's no
ever
Christian
said
that
2,000 years in 2000. No one did.
Our favorite
it's always right now. It's always right now.
Yeah.
Our favorite Pope Sylvester. What year was he?
1000 AD.
1000 AD.
In his mind, he's going off Revelation, the 1,000 years reign, the millennium. He's going off of in his idea, the millennium should be the end. That's what he's thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, okay. No, I'm thinking of Hippolytus. He's the other guy that wrote, because both Irenaeus and Hippolytus wrote against heresy, so I get them mixed up.
Yeah.
Hippolytus predicted 500, but I don't see anything for Irenaeus. You're right.
Right.
Okay, so in the case of Sylvester, for instance, he predicted the millennium. What did he use as justification for that prediction?
Well, it's the year 1000, so he's thinking it's 1,000 years have just gone by since Revelation was written. In Revelation, it talks about that after 1,000 years, Satan will be unchained and will have some time to do his thing.
Yes.
And
I can
that's what
definitely
he
see why. Mhm.
that's what he's going off. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
I
I
can
still
definitely see why. Yeah.
but I still don't understand in regards to what Jesus Christ was written to have said to his disciples that the moment is coming. Why wouldn't Jesus tell them exactly, yeah,
Well, he
like it's
told
going to
them.
be soon, but not that soon,
Well, he told them. Well, what's interesting is before Christ ascended into heaven, according to the scriptures, the apostles actually asked him, like, okay, like because they were they weren't under the impression that Christ was going to go ascend into heaven, right? They were under the impression that he was going to rise from the dead and restore the kingdom of Israel, and that's why they asked him. They said, "Lord, is it time now for you to restore the kingdom of Israel?" And Jesus, his response is interesting. He actually doesn't like rebuke the question or say like, "Oh, you fools, the church is Israel. Like this is, can't you see?" Like no, like he said the time is not for you to know, right?
Yeah.
So
I used to get in huge fights with my church over that verse because
Oh,
my
yeah.
pastor was. He was 100% positive that the date was going to be in 2020, which is already passed.
Man.
And I left the church right before this, by the way. And I remember thinking when 2020 passed, I was like, "Yes, I was right." He's probably pissed. But anyways, he was 100% positive, and I used to say to him, "But it says in this verse right here, no man except the Father shall know."
No man
And
shall
he would be
know.
like, "Neil, I understand that. That's for everyone else, but we know." And he was such a cocky bastard. Anyways,
Well,
but yeah, that verse,
yeah.
I used to throw that at him all the time.
Yeah. That's another passage. That's the one in Matthew. What I'm talking about specifically is in Acts, where the apostles are kind of expecting Jesus to sort of start the kingdom and like restore Israel. Give the kingdom back to the Jews and all that sort of thing.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And like Jesus never said, guys, like, don't you
No, the
see?
temple's over with until I come back. Basically, that's what he's basically saying. Like, they're like you're saying, they're expecting. Okay, are you going to bring us our temple back? What's the deal now? What are we doing? That's all they know.
Yeah.
And Jesus
Yeah.
is like, nope. It's
Yeah,
over, it's over
and he
with.
said the timing isn't now. So which means there will be all that stuff, but it just wasn't for them to know the time. So
But what
I
ab-
think
yeah.
there is a sort of thing in scripture where the authors of scripture sort of want you to think that that the time could be any time, right? Like that it can be imminent at any time, and to like basically you should live as if Jesus is coming back in your lifetime. But I think that was sort of the intent in a lot of how it's written. But
Now, what about Matthew 24:34? This generation will not pass away until all these things take place.
yeah. So if you look at the word, I actually just was talking to somebody about this. So I think that word generation there, I think if you actually look at the
Which passage is it?
Matthew 24:34. So you can look in the original Greek.
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I was just talking about this. Let me see if I can actually find. Yeah, here it is. Here it is.
Here
Yeah,
we go.
okay.
Genitai?
So, okay, I got
Genitai?
it here. Yeah, so in Matthew 24:34, it says, this generation would not pass away until all of Matthew 24, what he talked about in that chapter, was fulfilled, which, and a lot of people think that requires that the entire prophecy was fulfilled in 70 AD. But, but for one, in the same breath, Jesus equates the passing of this generation with the passing away of heaven and earth in the verse after this in 35. So, which is the first clue that the passing away of this generation will occur in the distant future when the new heavens and new earth are like established, after the second coming. And then like I was saying, the Greek and the Hebrew words for generation do not only refer to people born within a narrow window of time, like a millennial or a boomer or a Gen Xer or Gen Z or whatever. But, we mostly use generation this way in English, so that's, I think that's what throws a lot of people off. But in Greek and Hebrew, the word generation is, can also have a qualitative aspect, right? So like it can refer to certain types of people, no matter when they were born. Like in Philippians 2, chapter 2, verse 15.
It can mean race. It can mean race.
Yeah, it can mean, yeah. So Paul actually refers to that same, he uses that same word, genea, or generation. He says this is like the crooked and perverse generation, which is the same word used. And Paul is referring to people who were born, he's not referring to people born within a certain 40-year window or anything like that, but he's referring to evil people, and and the same holds true in Matthew 24. So so when Jesus talks about this generation, he's speaking about all of evil humanity from the fall to the second coming. And he's telling his disciples that evil humanity will persist until his second coming, and that this generation, which has existed since Adam, will only disappear after all the words of the prophets have been fulfilled at the end of the age. Right. So that's my understanding of it. Yeah.
I guess that's I'm fine with that being plausible for the Greek, but in other passages he's more specific about. He says, "Some of you here will not taste death."
Taste death, yes. And then what's the very next verse after that? Until
the Son of Man returns.
Until you see the Son of Man. Yep, until you see the Son of Man in glory.
Yeah, what passage is that again? I just want to see it real quick.
That is that's right before the transfiguration. What is that? That's Matthew 25 of the transfiguration, right?
So it's in the same chapter then, I think maybe?
I think it's in the same chapter, right?
Yeah,
could be mistaken.
Well,
but yes, so the very next thing that happens after some of you standing here will not taste death is the transfiguration, and that's what he was talking about, because they literally saw the Son of Man coming in glory in his kingdom, and the transfiguration itself was like a foretaste. And what's interesting is, how many days did Jesus have the apostles wait for at the bottom of the mount for the transfiguration? Exactly 6 days, just like the 6 days or 6,000 years of waiting.
I see.
So there's a lot. There's a lot of that kind of stuff.
Here's a problem with that. I found the verse. It's truly, I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death. But here's the problem, though. Before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom, it says, right, Basilia auto, of his kingdom. Where's the kingdom then? The kingdom never came.
That's what the transfiguration was. They saw the kingdom. They got where Jesus is, where he's in his glorified state. He's in all white.
Let's say you're right. Why even tell them then that some of you will not taste death, when of course they're not going to taste death, because it's only 6 more days away? It doesn't. Why wouldn't you just say? Why wouldn't you just say? You will see me in 6 days. You will see me coming in the kingdom. Why does he have to tell them?
The Bible never talks like that.
None of them died. What's the point of even saying that some of you won't taste death when none of them are going to die? All of them are going to live.
Well, we also
that's why it makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I think it still reads pretty good, because the apostles didn't really know what to expect, right? And like, I could see it more as a way of saying, like, right, like you're not going to believe what comes next, right? Like some of you won't even taste death until you see the Son of Man, like, wink wink, like almost like a nod to that their expectations would be subverted in a way, right? Like I think it reads pretty well.
Yeah, I just don't see the point of telling them they won't. I feel like if that was the case, he could have just said, "Wait until you see me coming in my kingdom next week," instead of "Some of you won't even be." Like, it just sounds. That would kind
of give it away, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but why not? They're all going to be there. None of them are going to die. So it's like,
Jesus, but Jesus never gives it away so easily. He always kind of does this thing where he's like kind of hinting at something. Yeah, almost like a mysterious thing, like.
Yeah, but we got to be careful not to use the whole God works in mysterious ways thing to excuse away things that could be looked at more thoroughly. Because that's like the universal thing to say. Well, God works in mysterious ways. I guess, what could I say to that? Absolutely nothing.
What I'm not saying is that, well, he works in mysterious ways, therefore we can excuse anything that doesn't make sense. But rather that he if you look at the way Christ talks, he's always speaking in parables. He's always speaking in ways that only certain people will understand. And, that's just kind of how he always talks. I mean, that to me, that's just consistent to how Jesus has always kind of operated, where he's talking very cryptically, right? Like in very cryptic
He
ways
talks
that
his
like
parables.
could only,
Yeah.
yes. You know,
Could it also work, and I'm not saying this is the case, but if we were to, let's say, pretend that the works that we know today of Jesus Christ were compilations that were done by completely different people who have no relation to each other, and when that compilation is brought forth, then it could be seen as being something kind of mysterious and otherworldly. And well, of course, this doesn't make sense because you have to look deeper into the mystery in order to understand it. Like that may be what's going on here. I don't know, when it comes to how much of the New Testament was written by completely different people, and now it's over here for us to try and figure out, well, this works with that, and that works with this, and this is why this is different from that. So if you were, for example, an apostle of Jesus Christ during his time, and you saw all these signs that he was giving out, what sign, if any, would there possibly be, just you as the average apostle, of Jesus Christ knowing that it's going to be like 2,000 years until we're actually going to start seeing the fruits of this? Like, what signs are there to indicate such a long time?
what sign is there that
what sign is there, if you're an apostle of Jesus Christ, that the completion is going to occur not like within the generation, but like 2,000 years
2,000
after?
years in the future, right?
Yeah.
And this is why I think it would be really cool if you guys watched Messiah 2030, because it really goes into like how a lot of this kind of stuff was foreshadowed in the Old Testament. Like for example, like in Daniel, it talks about Daniel's 70th week, and what the case that the film makes is that that Daniel's 70th week is actually split up in two. That the first 3.5 years of the 70th week were fulfilled in Christ's ministry, and that there would be a 2-day or 2,000 year gap time period, which is the age of the Gentiles, right? Which is the age that God temporarily blinds the Jews, and the gospel goes out to the Gentile nations, which is the age we're living in currently. And then the full inclusion of Gentiles comes, and then once that happens, then we enter into the tribulation period, the final 3.5 years, which is the 42 months or 3.5 years where the beast is given authority, where the Gentiles trample the holy city in that sort of end times beastly role.
Isn't it interesting? That's the same amount of time that Caligula reigned for.
Caligula?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was almost like exactly 42. Well, technically, he was the what's his name? Claudius becomes emperor for right at around 48 months. But there was a 6-month period where Caligula neglected all of his imperator duties and was on the run until he gets murdered finally. So whoever wrote that could have, like, 42 months is almost exactly how long Caligula was in power for. Almost exactly.
Yeah, 42 months, because 42 months is 3.5 years. And
exactly, too.
And then we had the 3.5 years of Christ's ministry.
The Daniel thing. You know what else is crazy about that? I mentioned, I noticed this when I was a Christian, and I still talk about it. 3.5 years is exactly how long the war it goes on for. Nero raids the temple, right? The Jews revolt, and that happens in 66 AD. 70 AD is exactly 3.5 years later. It was in the summer of 66, all the way to 70. The temple gets destroyed. That's 3.5 years. Perfectly lines up. And then it's another 3.5 years, fall of Masada, 74 AD. Then there's 3. So there's like a little bit of a peacetime. And then another 3.5. It matches on perfectly. But the crazy part about this is Daniel. This 3.5 year thing is from Daniel. This is before Revelation. So it's weird how that mapped on pretty well.
Yeah, it's like a foretaste almost. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, I think if we look at history, I think we'll see a lot of that. I see history as a sort of a cyclical and thematic thing, especially biblical history.
Things seem to line up like that.
Yeah, they do.
Now, when it comes to the question again, I want to ask Neil of anything at all that Jesus would have said, like if you would fit even more than me as an apostle of Jesus with your thick beard. So imagine you were living in that time and you were seeing Jesus, and Jesus would be talking to you. What would, if anything, come out of Jesus's mouth that we know of that would clue you in that there is a difference between the completion where there's the transfiguration that Donnie, you were talking about right now, and the kind of completion of, the end of times that would happen 2,000 years from now? Because right now, at least in my head, if I was a disciple of Jesus, that would be one and the same, at least to me. That when we're talking about completion, that's like a one and done deal. It's not going to be that, well, I'm going to come back and then we're going to have to wait 2,000 years.
Paul's writing letters to these churches and telling them not even to bother even getting married. That's how close Paul thinks it's going to be. Mm-hmm. Paul is saying, like, we're all just it's going to be a snap of our finger. We're all going to be raised up. And he says, he's like, marriage, don't even worry about it unless you really have to, and then do it. But like, he's not telling people to settle down and build these Christian communities and do like long-term things. He's basically saying, get ready because it's about to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But
like I said, I think that's the mentality, and I think that's the mentality that that Jesus kind of wanted them to have, right? Like, because he always
there's a lot of parables about the coming in, the thief in the night parable.
Yeah, the thief in the night. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that it'll come unexpectedly and suddenly you won't be ready for it. So be ready for it right now at all times.
Don't be like a drunkard out with your friends, and then the landowner comes back for the rent and you're not there ready to pay it. Always be ready to, like, basically there's like 10 parables that line up with that type of teaching.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas
but even that you could interpret that as being in exactly the time when Jesus dies and then is resurrected. Or you could interpret that anywhere from the time that Paul was talking about, any time now, to Pope Sylvester, all the way to 2030, right? So you can stretch that time out indefinitely. You could stretch that out forever, and you could always say, well, Jesus never said exactly when it's going to happen, so we better be ready at any time. But to me, there is still a big difference even between what Paul was saying, any time now, and the idea that once the transfiguration happens, that's it. That's when the completion should occur. What, if anything, in the New Testament points to the transfiguration, Jesus comes back to life, that is when it should happen? Does anything point to that at all, or not really?
You're talking about anything pointing
to
the
completion? Yeah, so once Jesus comes back, then that's it. That's when the world should end. That's when the completion should.
So what's supposed to happen actually when Jesus comes back? There's a couple of things that's supposed to happen. Number one, Christ comes back in the midst of a global sort of turmoil where all of the nations of the world, gather against the city of Jerusalem, right? And this is we also see this is like the pattern or typology of the beast, which is like God raises up the beast, he raises up the nations against Jerusalem in judgment, right? Allows like a certain amount to be killed, and then preserves a remnant. And then Christ comes back to this remnant that's like, that's repenting and saying, Jesus, the one of Nazareth, he is the Messiah. So he comes back to a repentant, welcoming Jerusalem. He prophesies this in Matthew 23:39, where he says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And that's a callback to Zechariah 12, where it talks about how, they will mourn for the one they have pierced, like a mother mourns for her son. And so Christ is going to come back to, the Jews kind of in this turmoil, in this sort of trouble, in this trial, and he's going to essentially destroy their enemies. He's going to essentially with the words of his mouth, with the Torah, right? And through these words that, the kingdoms of the world will be dashed and destroyed, and then like some will be allowed to live and continue on, and and it's not like a lot of people think where Christ comes back and like everything just ends. Like, so there's still a 1,000-year period of time where Christ reigns literally and physically on the earth as a literal king of a sort of global, like a sort of one world order, centered in Jerusalem or Zion, right? So so the real king of the new world order is biblically speaking is Jesus himself, and that any sort of global power or authority that the Antichrist has is but temporarily, only like a 42-month period of time.
That's the Revelation 20 passages about the 1,000-year reign, right?
Yeah, for 1,000 years, and then
and that's why and that's why the Pope Sylvester's idea was kind of flawed, because Pope Sylvester's only looking at the verse where it says, and when the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from prison, and he'll deceive the nations and go get Gog and Magog ready.
Yep.
But if you go a couple verses before that, it talks about Christ reigning with his believers for 1,000 years on earth. That didn't happen. So Sylvester in his mind was probably thinking, well, this is about us. We're the ones reigning with Christ.
Yeah.
And we're the church. And like it's kind of messed up, because the fact that what they were wrong kind of points to the church not being like true, if that makes sense. Which is probably why it only took a couple centuries later where you start getting Protestant revolutions, because they're like, dude, all this shit they've been saying is not coming true. Maybe they're not the real church. Maybe we're supposed to do it. But yeah, the point is like that whole it's supposed to be, according to Revelation, there's supposed to be 1,000-year reign of Christ and his followers, and then Satan comes.
Yeah, and that's when Satan's released.
Comes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when Gog and Magog comes, right? So there's two wars, right? So there's the one pre-Christ return, and there's the one post millennium, right? So
yeah.
So, but what's interesting is the 1,000 years, like, so that 1,000-year number isn't like a random number. So like, what's interesting is like
it's
I talked
the
about
same amount of time from David to the fall of Jerusalem, 1,000 years.
Yeah, and what's interesting too? How many years did David live for?
He was 70 years old, right?
He was 70 years old,
and he reigned for 30 years. Or at age 30, he became the king and reigned for 40 years.
Yes.
So all these weird, me and Anne-Marie talk about this all the time. All these numbers lining up is so weird.
Yes,
so weird.
That's what Messiah 2030 really gets into. If you really want to dive into the numbers and how even from creation, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, all these numbers like.
This is what makes people become mythicists, though, because they go, these numbers lining up are just too
so perfectly. Yeah,
there's something he either didn't exist or what.
Yeah,
I think you could still have a guy existing, and all this stuff can be applied to him. I think there's a middle ground. Doesn't mean it has to. People are scared to admit that he existed because they're like, oh, if he existed and all these numbers lining up, that means something's real. They're like, they don't want to go there. But I tell people, no, it doesn't mean shit. It just means this stuff is being applied post hoc.
Yeah. Like maybe it was Alibaba and the 37 Thieves, but it just doesn't sound that good. So I can definitely see what you guys are talking about with the numbers.
But it is fascinating that you have 1,000 years almost exactly from the time of David to the time of 70 AD when the Second Temple falls. And then on top of that, David's reign is 70 years. He becomes king of Jerusalem after age 30. Jesus starts his ministry at age 30. Jesus dies 3 years later, and then 40 years later the temple falls, which is funny because 40 years after David becomes king, he dies. The first anointed falls. So it is, you got to admit, the numbers lining up is pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, and if you want to talk about Jesus mythicism. Yeah, you got to have Adam Green on.
Yeah,
I think
we had him on. Yeah,
me and him talked about this before.
Yeah.
The list goes on. You have a Saul from the tribe of Benjamin chasing David around in Samuel, in the books of Samuel, and he's chasing the anointed. I mean, David is literally called the Christ in Greek, or Moshiach in Hebrew.
Moshiach. Yep.
And so he's the Messiah. He's the Messiah in this Old Testament, and he's being chased around by this false Messiah, who's the anointed, the fake Messiah, the one who was anointed because Samuel had to do it. He had no choice.
Yep.
And then he's chasing David around, and then what does he do right before his time comes? He repents and he apologizes to David for ever chasing him around. And then his name is Saul. He's from the tribe of Benjamin, right? And then in the New Testament, you have another guy named Saul from the tribe of Benjamin chasing all the Christians around. Now, he's not chasing Christ around, but he's chasing the anointed one people around. And then what happens? Just like David, he's met face to face with Jesus, and then he repents.
Right.
So you got to, the mythicists are going, oh my God, this is too perfect.
I get it.
You know?
No, I get it 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. And that's the thing is, you know, when you really see like how things are like perfectly aligned, and like there's so much stuff like this. I made a post about like how like things line up perfectly. You really have to fall either on the I can't even say that word.
Mythicist
side, or like maybe there's something to this side, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know,
I totally agree with you on that. I totally agree with you.
To Donnie's side here, the people who are talking about King David, even if King David was fake or whatever, still the date for King David's reign, from what I understand, it was established at around the time that we had all of these incidents occur, you know, with the fall of Jerusalem and all of that. So that was still something that was considered to occur at a certain date during that time, right? So it still lines up.
David, are you talking about the collapse of the Bronze Age? You're talking about?
Yeah, well, I'm talking.
David's the beginning.
Yes, I'm talking about.
But that is an interesting point because David comes up. David kind of rises up right after the collapse of an entire paradigm, which we call the Bronze Age, and then the Iron. This is the beginning of the Iron Age, and then you get David and Solomon and so forth, and Omri and so forth. Which is interesting because it's like a lot of historians will say the Iron Age was like the world was reset. It was a whole different world. The Bronze Age was a whole different world, and then everything collapses, and then the Iron Age is a completely new world. It's a whole new political paradigm, whole new kingdoms. Everything's different, and it's interesting that's when the kingdom of Israel becomes a thing. There is no kingdom of Israel in the Bronze Age. There's a people called Israel mentioned by the Maranatha Stele, but they're not talking about like a grand kingdom yet.
A big kingdom, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
If you guys want to hear something really cool, kind of on the topic, so I talked earlier about like some early church fathers believed that human history was like 6,000 years, mirroring the 6 days of creation, right? So take this, right? So like from Adam, you could say there are 3 2,000-year epochs of like human history from a biblical like chronology perspective, right? And then followed by the final 1,000-year Sabbath rest or the millennial kingdom. So take this, right? So from Adam to Abraham, biblically, is like 2,000 years. From Abraham to Jesus, biblically, 2,000 years. And then from Jesus to the present, right, is we're hitting right on 2,000 years, right? And so the 1,000-year Messianic kingdom would be like the 7th day, the Sabbath millennium in which Christ reigns, and it corresponds to that pattern of God resting on the 7th day. And the theory is that Jesus died and rose around 30 AD, and making the start of the final 2,000 year, making that the start of the final 2,000-year age, and that 2030 actually would mark exactly 2,000 years since that event. So according to a lot of people, a lot of people seem to think that we're approaching the end of the 6th day, or the 6th, or in the beginning of the 7th day rest. And then you have this concept of the Jubilee periods, the 120 Jubilees, right? So like a Jubilee is a time period of 50 years where after the end, debts would be forgiven, slaves were to be free, restitution granted. It was a time of like liberation for like the people or whatever, right? So like there's this idea of like 120 jubilees, because if you do 120 times 50, right, you get 6,000, right? And then so in Genesis 6, right, it says, "Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, his days shall be 120 years," right? So when people see, so a lot of people think of like, 120 years is probably a lifespan, but a lot of ancient Jewish and prophetic interpretations saw that as like a reference to 120 Jubilee cycles, right? So that aligns with it. So like 6,000 years, 6 days of man, followed by 7th day of rest, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. So in that view, like the 120 years it might be a hidden timeline for human history itself, and which will end in judgment and deliverance, just like in the days of Noah, right?
And that all sounds great, but then it's like then we start discovering that civilization actually is a lot older than 6,000 years.
Yeah, a lot older than 6,000 years. I would agree.
So I guess, is it like Sumer is like the starting point of like the super civilized? I mean, I'm trying to steel man you here. Is it like Sumer? Because it works if Sumer was the beginning of everything, it works.
Yeah,
but then
what about Göbekli Tepe?
So, then you're like, okay, now we're in 10,000 BC. Now it's like, now where's the world? So I mean, go ahead.
Yeah. So like a lot of people in like Jewish thought kind of look at that, and like they would say that it would be Adam would be like the first, not like the first man in the biblical story, that like God.
I just thought of a better steel man than that. Adam is the Jesus is the last Adam, right? That's from John, right?
Yeah.
Well, if Jesus is the Word, Adam represents when writing started to become a thing, which would be around 6,000 years ago. Where you start getting cuneiform right around that time.
Yeah.
Well, Adamu is the Akkadian word for man.
Yeah. There's tons of biblical stuff coming from Sumer and Akkadian.
Sumer,
Akkadian would be the Akkadian,
well, including also the creation of people themselves. So that's the other kind of interesting situation we got going here, where people point to a lot of these older myths, like the Sumerian myths.
But
where
I just want to point out, though, Akkadian isn't 4,000 BC. It's more around 2,000 BC. And then Sumer is not Semitic. Sumer is pre-Semitic.
Yeah.
The Akkadian Empire is the first Semitic empire of Babylon. But still, you can even, just to go with that theory of when writing became a thing, you're right around 3,500 BC, right around that 6,000 ish period. So you can make that like your that's when the word became part of civilization. And that's what expanded our minds so that we can get to God. Well, because we need the word to get scripture, right? I'm just.
For instance, around 17,000, 6,000 BC, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Atrahasis epic. Atrahasis talked about how the gods created humans, the Adamu, from clay in the earth, which they mixed together with the blood of a god. And so Adamu became, this new man. So that seems to be very connected, at least in my head, to the Adam and Eve story. It would be weird for them to say like, oh, well, those guys just made it all up. No, I mean, this is very old, and it talks about a very similar situation. So that can't just be thrown out, right?
The Enuma Elish is even older. I'm looking for the date. I can't really find it right now, but it's probably like 2,500 BC, something like that. And it has a 7-day creation, or is it 7 days or 7 week creation epic, but there's a number 7 there, and so there's 7 years. I think it might be 7 days actually, but it has a lot of the Enuma Elish lines up with Genesis. That's scholarly
there's
consensus.
Like a flood, right? There's like a great flood. There's
you have a 7-day creation. You have a great flood. You have all that stuff.
Yeah, there's like a lot of similarities there, right? Yeah, I've definitely heard about that.
So if all of these were going on before the official start date of the Torah, what does that tell us about the Torah?
Well, asking me?
Oh, I'm asking to both of you guys, whoever wants to.
To me, I think these stories get passed on. It doesn't mean I wouldn't say they're copying or plagiarizing. I think these stories are very sacred to everybody, and they're getting passed down.
Taking inspiration.
Yeah, and they're just kind of personalizing it, and they're making their own Jewish version of these stories that everyone already knows.
But if they are making these stories that everybody knows, then the timeline, it wouldn't really line up. Because if everything is based on when creation with Adam and Eve was supposed to happen, all of a sudden now you got to kind of start all over. You can't just ignore the fact that we have all these different legends talking about the same thing, also using numerology, also using, the Apkallu, the 7 sages pre-flood. There were 7 of them.
The Epic of Gilgamesh even is the details are so spot on. You have what's the character's name? Atrahasis, who when he survives the flood, he has all the animals on the flood on the ark with him, or the boat with him, and he lets off a dove waits for the dove to come back, then lets off a raven, waits for the raven to come back, and which is exactly what we get in Genesis. Like that little detail about the dove and the raven is in this story, which is like. But here's the problem with that: it's not Noah in this story. It's Atrahasis. It's a different person in this story. But he does land in Armenia. So I'm like, the story lines up pretty well. We have a different character now, you know.
So
Right.
okay,
And he doesn't worship Yahweh; he worships Enlil. So
Enlil, and that's why you hear a lot of people say that Enlil is Yahweh. Like I don't know if you follow a lot of these guys on like YouTube and like stuff. Like I think like Billy Carson, like makes some kind of case for that, right?
Oh yeah, a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Well, Enlil, and from what I understand, Anu was supposed to be the equivalent of Uranus, and Enlil was the equivalent of Saturn. And there was that very interesting story, by the way, from Sankanyetin, who was a historian from the Phoenician historian, who, and this is thanks to you, Neil, that I know about this, very fascinating, how he sacrificed his son, Yedud, which, what does Yedud mean? Like beloved?
It means only begotten.
Only begotten, thank you. How
that's what it gets translated as. Yeah.
How he sacrificed his only begotten son to Uranus, and he actually goes through with it. You know, unlike Abraham and Isaac, he actually ends up sacrificing him. And then, in order to mark that day for all of his followers, he orders them all to circumcise themselves. Yeah.
And that, according to the primary sources that copied that source, so you have the closest one to us is Eusebius, the church father. And he copies that from Philo of Byblos, who lived in the 2nd century AD. And Philo of Byblos copies the Phoenician version. But they all say, according to the sources, they all said this guy was a priest of the god, who was spelled in Greek, Iota, Epsilon, Upsilon, Iota. But it looks like Yahweh. They say he's a priest of Yahweh that lived in Phoenicia in like the 1200s BC, they say.
Upsilon, I like that.
Obviously, the scholars are very critical of how accurate is this. Should we even listen? There's a bunch of discourse on this. It's one of the most debated fragments ever. Like if you go back to the 1700s, you'll find scholars debating it. You back to the medieval period, maybe medieval period. In the Renaissance, they start talking about this source pretty heavily too. So this is like a well debated story.
I like this comment over here by Destroyer of Iniquity 6779. I like this Gnostic guy. Is he a Christian?
No, I was. I used to be. I still like talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes I like to put when I had a conversation with Inspiring Philosophy years ago, I told them before, I said, listen, let's just assume Christianity's true for this conversation. And we start from that starting point. And then we just had we talked about Gnosticism and heresy. And we don't have to let's start off at a big tug of war of, is this God even real? I feel like we're just going to be sitting here for hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Doing Reddit tier shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, but it is important, though, to focus on things like, Donnie, you were bringing up the timelines. And it is a very important question, not to go all over the place, but since we are talking about these timelines, and now we're introducing the various Babylonian, Sumeria, the Sankanyetin guy, Yedud, all this stuff, even if some of these were to be proven to be false, there's a lot of these that have historical, a significance.
That's what Eusebius, when he was examining this story, he didn't care if it was true or not. He cared that it was a prophecy for Christ. And he says he says literally word for word, this story from Sankanyetin is a portent for the Son of God being the only begotten and his sacrifice. So Christians took this story seriously, even though it was pagan.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And by the way, if anyone's wondering, it's this one right here.
Everybody subscribe. Everybody
it's
subscribe.
Called Preparation for the Gospel.
Ooh,
by Eusebius of Caesarea. He has a whole chapter about this Phoenician theogony.
Oh wow.
And
That's cool.
things could be observed that way. And again, like, I'm not trying to shake the boat too much here, but at the same time, if certain things could be said as axiomatic, like we're talking about the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, for instance, if certain things could be said without a doubt to shift the timeline much further back than when Genesis starts, would that, and this is a question to you, Donnie, would that affect the timelines that have been projected here and the numerology and all that?
I don't think necessarily. Like you said, you talked to Inspiring Philosophy, which by the way, I'm gonna have to watch that. Inspiring Philosophy is actually one of my favorites. He actually kind of turned me on to the ideas of because he's like what's the word again? He's a theistic
Evolutionist, yeah.
Yes, theistic.
He
Evolution.
believes in
Yes,
evolution,
yes.
but he thinks it was like which I respect that. I think that's a very informed way to look at.
Yeah, I think it is respectable. Because I think it's a position that not a lot of people are willing to take, and he's a very smart guy. Like he doesn't,
for sure.
So,
by the way, just want to show you this real quick
sure.
if I can.
Sure, and also, by the way, imagine having the opposite position, that you don't believe in evolution, but at the same time aren't religious, don't believe in any of the Gospels and the Torah. That would be an interesting position to have. But anyway, saying.
So there's the Phoenician spelling, and it's Sakun Yatan, and means like Sakun has given.
And who is Sakun?
It's one of those Phoenician deities, lesser deities.
Okay.
But look, it says right here, records from Hieronymus calls him a priest of Yayo. So these sources call him a priest of Yayo. But anyways, yeah, all we know about him is this far back from antiquity, 2nd millennium BC, very, very shadowy figure. We don't know really much about him, and this theogony he has. The highest god is Elion, according to him, Hypsistos in Greek, Uranos, and then you get down to El.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're seeing here is you're seeing the polytheistic rendering of there's this god Yedu, the only begotten, and then Apollo's down here.
Apollo? Yeah, Zeus, Belus.
Yeah, it's fast. It's one of the most. It's one of the most fascinating pieces of literature of all time, by far. Yeah,
pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah,
I like
very
looking
nice.
at ancient. I love reading like ancient, esoteric or religious kind of stuff like that. Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's why I respect Eusebius so much. He wasn't afraid to look into this shit and go, well, let's see what we can find. He was like an ancient version of who's that one author who thought the pagans were kind of pointing to Christ? I'm trying to think of his name. It's a famous.
I think I've heard. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he's like he does
but he would read.
He does fantasy stuff. He does like fantasy novels and famous Christian. I can't think of his name right now, but he was like this too. But basically, Eusebius is like an ancient version of this guy, who's willing to look at the ancient pagan sources as just as much part of the tradition as the Jewish sources.
Yeah, you're not talking about C.S. Lewis, are you?
C.S. Lewis, yeah.
I
think Eusebius was like an ancient C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
But again, I know I keep on ramming this question through, but when it does come to the timelines we were talking about, what is your take, Donnie, on whether these things that were introduced end up changing the way that these timelines and numerologies are looked at?
I mean, I think I kind of have like my proposed timeline, and I think it lines up very well biblically, scripturally, and my kind of thinking right now is like let's wait and see,
But does it rely on Genesis? Does it rely on the beginning of the world as according to Genesis and when Adam and Eve were around and all that? Like if all of a sudden, let's say all that ended up getting shifted, would that affect the rest of the timeline or no?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. Yeah.
All right.
Because the whole biblical timeline is really based on like it's you gotta remember it's all within a very Jewish context, right? So like it's there's from you're really going from Adam to Jesus, right? Not that you're necessarily There's there's a lot of ways to look at it. I don't think it would really change much. Mm-mm.
Now, since you mentioned the Jewish outlook, I would be remiss if we did not talk about Matthew 5:17. Since when we are talking about the completion here, in Matthew 5:17, what was the completion that Jesus was referring to there? Was he referring to when he rose from the dead, or was he referring to the 2,000 years potentially or longer after?
In Matthew 5:17,
yes,
where he talks about how he did not come to abolish the law or the prophets.
Yes, exactly.
To fulfill them.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, he's come to fulfill the law and the prophets. Right. So
but the question is that verse also talks about until, I forget how it goes. Neil, how does it go? Like until it was
not a jot, not a tittle thrown away. If anybody who throws away one of these will be the least in the kingdom of heaven. It's a very hotly debated verse.
Yeah.
Which one is it again? I'll pull it up.
Matthew 5:17.
Yeah, and the reason why it's so debated is Orthodoxy basically stuck their stance on this is saying this means that we're not obliged to follow the law. Christ came, fulfilled it, so we don't have to follow it anymore. We just got to have faith in Christ and follow and go to the church. But then there's other people who would argue, nah, he's actually saying you should try to follow it as much as possible. Like you probably shouldn't eat pork. You probably shouldn't eat shellfish. You probably should try to do the laws because this is what God commanded. This is why wouldn't you? What do you think? God changed his mind? Hell no. That's the other argument. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I think the latter argument makes a lot of sense because it's like, okay, he fulfilled it. So that means then throw it away. He literally says, "Don't throw it away."
And right, when is the it says not will pass from the law until hold on. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. So when is this accomplishment supposed to occur? Is it supposed to occur during the transfiguration? Is it supposed to occur, after he comes back to life, or is it supposed to occur at a time? Yeah,
I think the all is accomplished is probably talking about his two comings. No.
Okay, but is it talking about one of the two comings or both of them?
That's a good question right there.
Yeah, it's a good question, right?
Because if it's both of them, then Christians should be following the law right now, and they're not.
There should be the Levite priest class.
I just saw a video on Twitter of Muslims saying that they were being taunted by Christians with bacon. Like, you want Jesus to come back and see you doing that, and you're supposed to be following the law? You guys are screwed.
Yeah. You guys are more screwed than the tail of a pig. But anyway, because if you ever look at a pig's tail, it's like a little corkscrew. I think actually their penises are also like corkscrew shaped. Really? I don't know. Somebody look that up. Jamie, pull that up. So anyway,
pull a picture of the pig penis.
Yeah. So okay. So
but I guess I would say like. Because people will say, well, the temple's gone, so we can't do sacrifices. We can't do atonement for sins anymore because for atonement for sins, you need the temple, you need the priest. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, but what does that have to do with animal dietary laws? You could still do that stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think this is probably what the Ebionites were doing in the first and second, third century. The Ebionites were probably saying, well, whatever we can't do, then it's not our problem. We can't go to the temple anymore. Right. But we can do like I'm not going to eat pork because God told Moses that this animal is an abomination. Are we going to sit there and say he changed his mind and we can eat it now? Well, no.
Right.
So the Ebionites were very much against what Acts is saying. Acts is saying that Peter had that dream, and Peter was like, all animals are good now. We can eat snakes and shit now. And like, so I get it. I get why there would be some sort of debate on that.
Mm. But again, going back to the all is accomplished part and the second coming, when it comes to, again, being in the mind of these disciples, listening to Jesus back in the day, the accomplishment, it always just seems to be right around the corner. It almost seems like it's been split up now into these two separate accomplishments where it should have been one, but it didn't happen. So now it's become, at a later time.
Well, I think it was always supposed to be like two comings, like even in like Judaism's understanding of like Moshiach ben David and Moshiach ben Yosef, and like they have that concept in view, but they don't have the same view as like, you know, it's one person accomplishing these things. And like, you know, even if you look at the feasts, right, like I've heard it said like the first 4 feasts represent like what Jesus accomplished in his first coming, and then the last 3 feasts, you know, represent what he will accomplish on his second coming. And there's like a lot there with that.
But that's still reading into the mysteries as opposed to it being, you know, spelled out, which you could say, well, maybe that's the point. But another way of looking at it is, you know, trying to grasp for making this thing work by any means necessary if it didn't work to begin with, which is the view that some people have, where it didn't happen. You know, Jesus was supposed to come back, and there was supposed to be, you know, this reign of the Messiah and all that, but it did not happen. So now we're just going to wait, you know, twiddling our thumbs for God knows how long.
Well, it kind of makes sense, right? Because the whole point of Christ even going away and then coming at a later date was to give time for the gospel to go out to all the, you know, the corners of the world, so that you know, all the Gentiles could hear the gospel. That's something that could have been done in like, you know, a couple years or a couple decades even, right? Like that is that kind of like
well,
you know,
look at Islam today though, like
to get a little Reddit to you for a second. You couldn't just show up right now and go on TV and show people, you know.
Right? But that wouldn't be.
I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I told you Reddit's here. I told you.
Well, you know, a common theme too in scripture is like the subverting of human expectation, right? Like that's like a consistent theme that we see. And I think that even when Christ comes again, I think that the whole world's expectations of what it's supposed to be like will be subverted to the point of people actually not quite understanding what's even happening or recognizing, you know, what's happening, to the point where they're actually fighting against, you know, the coming of Christ.
You just said what I feel about Christianity and Judaism. I think there is a God, and that when things will be revealed at the end of time, people are going to feel really stupid for pushing religions that were political and had these like sort of worldly aspirations, when the one, as Plato describes, is so perfect, doesn't need anything from us. We're already doing its will because we're just doing it. Like there's nothing that needs to be done or said. The one is perfect. It can't be jealous. It's in need of nothing. So I see the biblical religions as contradictory of that, because this God who says he's jealous is telling you to go out in the world and do these things that he needs you to do. But like, if a God's perfect and all knowing, then he doesn't have to do any of that. It's just going to happen, right?
I get what you're saying with that. I think that, again, like I think that if you look at the way that like Yahweh in the Bible operates, like it's always like, because the whole point is to reveal the wicked nature of man, and like, you know, God's sort of you know, mercy and judgment, and you know his other characteristics, right? So like you know, if you look at the way like God operates like from a biblical view, right? He's always, you know, it's not like you said, like, well, couldn't he just come out? Like that's kind of what Satan said to Christ, right? Like when he was tempting him with the kingdoms of the world, he's like, well, couldn't you just jump off this mountain and people will, you know, the angels will catch you, and you know, you know, everybody would know that you are truly the Messiah, right? And then like, you know, Jesus is you know, making the case like no, like because the whole point was that Christ had to go through the suffering before he got the glory, right? And that like Satan was kind of offering him like a shortcut, right? And so like you know, like it's like oh well, couldn't God have done it this way? It's like kind of like the question of like the Lord of the Rings. Like, couldn't they have gotten on the Eagles and flown to Mordor and just dropped the dang rings in? It's like, sure, but then you wouldn't have the whole trilogy, right? Then you wouldn't have.
I don't have a problem of God putting us into a world where we're trying to gain virtue through these different things, right? But the whole thing of us being wicked, isn't that isn't that out of our power? We're the creation.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine creating beings and they suck, and then being like, F you.
And not only that, but
intentionally,
intentionally,
fix them. I did this, right?
And not only that, but also intentionally hardening the Pharaoh's heart in order for him to keep pursuing the Hebrews. That was God, you could say,
That's another one,
puppeteering, intervening on behalf of, people who are supposed to have free will. Like the Pharaoh should himself have decided, if he was being a free will.
Well, to be fair, so when the Bible talks about like for example, I was just having this conversation the other day about Pharaoh's heart being hardened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people misinterpret that and say, oh, so Pharaoh didn't have any free will at all. God made the decision for him. But if you actually read how God hardened his heart, it was judicially, and it was by Pharaoh's choice, right? So this is the concept of judicial hardening, right? It's essentially God basically taking someone's decision of disobedience, right? It's taking someone who's already, on one path and sort of giving them over to it, but saying, I'm going to accomplish my purpose through your disobedience, through your, and that's essentially, that's what happened with Pharaoh. That's what we see happen, like against King Ahab, right? When Yahweh sent lying spirits into the mouths of King Ahab's prophets, to deceive them into thinking that they would be victorious, right? And that in itself was a judgment against them, right? In the same way, Revelation 17 verse 17 says that God puts it into the heart of the beast and his kings to deliver judgment on the harlot, right? It's not that the beast never had a choice in choosing what to do, but that that God used an already rebellious heart, an already hardened and rebellious heart, and said, okay, I'm going to give you over to your own deception, to your own delusion, and use it to fulfill my greater purpose. And we see that ultimately with the cross too, right? Satan probably thought, from a biblical view, right? Satan probably thought that he was probably throwing over God's plan of redemption by, entering Judas and having Jesus delivered to the Romans to be killed, right? But, little did Satan know, little did the rulers of the age know that, that was actually part of God's plan all along, right? For Judas to hand him over, for Christ to be delivered and ultimately killed, right? Which is why Jesus says to Peter, when Jesus is talking about, I'm going to go into, and be arrested and killed. And, Peter says that's never going to happen, Master. That'll never happen. And what does Jesus say? He says, get behind me, Satan, right? Like you are a hindrance to me, right? He calls Peter Satan in that moment, for saying that Jesus isn't going to go die, right? Yeah. And so I think it actually works very well with the flow of that kind of overview when it comes to how we see the biblical God operating throughout Scripture. To me, it's all very consistent in its own internal framework.
Neil, what say you?
I mean, if I get what you're saying, I just don't know. I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea of a perfect and all-knowing, and I don't know how we got on this subject, but I'm saying needing things from its own creation, and then almost. I don't know. I don't see how this can be. Mm-hmm. I
get your hang up. Yeah, I get your hang up. Yeah, it's not that necessarily God needs something to be a certain way, but more so that God is trying to reveal something through things being a certain way, right?
And if that was the case, then fine. But then wouldn't that follow that? I'm not even trying to be sound like a softie or anything, but but seriously, wouldn't the game plan follow that you're trying to fix your own creation rather than condemn them? You're trying to reveal them something. You're trying to get them to do something, and then it's if they fail to do so, wouldn't that be on you? At the end of the day,
I mean, the Gnostics, the early Gnostics would think so, yeah. but so no, I don't think so, and I think a lot of the brunt of the blame is on it's a lot of the. I think a lot of it is a critique on, this idea of total autonomy over ourselves, our own destiny. I think that the Garden of Eden story, if you want to get philosophical about it, is a critique on, the idea of total human autonomy, or trying, or this very this idea that like I said the other day, I think like the idea of free will could very easily become an idol in a lot of people. I think free will isn't necessarily about humans having the total autonomy to shape their destinies or to be the authors of human history, but rather the author of human history is the sovereign Lord, and that the free will that we are given is the choice to respond to his sovereignty and to his will, if that makes sense. And I think that's ultimately what free will from a biblical view is about, right?
Donnie, I have a question
but now you know why. Now you know why some of these early Gnostics like Marcion and Basilides could not fathom Yahweh being Plato's one. They were because everyone in that time period who was educated was was educated in Aristotle and Plato, and they all thought of God through Plato's framework.
Yes.
Perfect, all-knowing.
Yep.
He's in need of nothing.
Yep.
And then they're like trying to wrap their heads around, well, is
How
Jesus
Yahweh.
the son of Yahweh from this Old Testament? Or is there something else going on in this Old Testament where there's a different being that's called Yahweh who's like kind of subservient to the one, just like Sophia is also subservient to the one. And then you have, so this is how you get the whole Gnostic framework. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the whole thing, is like that sort of Platonism that kind of shaped a lot of that stuff, like I think of the analogy of Plato's cave, right? Where, you have sort of like the sort of illusion that's being sort of shown to us. And then you have like, the escape of that sort of those chains, or whatever, however you want to describe it, is like, seeing, or seeing the controllers, seeing the reality outside of the cave, right? So like
getting outside the matrix.
Outside of the matrix, yes, exactly. We see these ideas kind of sort of mainstreamed in like the Matrix, and like I think personally, that the entire deception that's playing out right now with this Great Awakening is exactly that. Is Plato's cave? Is the Matrix? Is the Truman Show? Right? Is sort of the idea that mankind is awakening to a sort of a grand conspiracy, that that the real world has been hidden from us, that reality has been hidden from us, and that in its place we've been given an illusion, and that a lot of this stuff was sort of a lot of this stuff was echoed in Blavatsky. A lot of this stuff was echoed in Bailey and Theosophy, right? Breaking free of the illusions of of the Maya, they called it, the Maya, the Matrix, right? And that, and that's why, so I come from, like, I guess you could say, like, the opposite perspective, where if you look at Genesis, it says that God created the world and he saw that it was good, right? So like, whereas the Gnostics would say, like, that the world, everything that's material, or that God or Yahweh trapped us in matter, right? To like sort of hide our or maybe our divine spark, or whatever power that must be unlocked in order to sort of escape or awaken from the prison planet, or Maya, Matrix, illusion, right? A lot of different people use different words, but ultimately are saying the same thing. And I think personally, I think that's what the final sort of deception is.
I got to stop you right there, because when you're talking about escaping the Matrix, I think a lot of people in this Great Awakening, at least from the videos I've seen, it's like this guy Jordan Sather talks about these kind of things. I'm sure some of you guys know about him. The idea is that, well, all of the human beings are going to awaken, and they're all going to discover their hidden godhood. To me, I just personally find that idea very silly, because if we're talking about humanity, and this kind of a controversial take, I would put in our fellow animals along with us, and also like really like super primitive hominids, that walks the earth, and I would put all of them in the category of people, animals to
Or
my
just spirits,
to my
just
view.
as beings,
But
yeah.
they're beings who operate on different levels of awareness. Meaning that if there is any kind of an awakening, one can say that human beings are more woke than the animals, but the animals are more woke than the plants. And again, it doesn't mean that the plants are dumb. I mean, if we look at all these systems that are being used from one tree to another tree, communicating through mushrooms, it's a very intricate system, but I'm not sure how much there is a development of the self within these like super organisms. Same thing if you see like a flock of seagulls or a school of fish. Like, it does seem to be operating on more of like this super panpsychic organism like Rupert Sheldrake likes talking about, as opposed to the human being who may have lost certain abilities that the animals still have, like being able to predict when earthquakes are happening. But at the same time, there is this individuation that is going on that I think is key here. So the question is, and this goes to Neil's point about virtue, does the biblical Torah and the New Testament, does that develop the kind of virtue where one can actually be awakened in the right way, as opposed to there being, a magic button press, now everybody's awakened, not everybody thinks that they're, godlike. It seems like the path, Neil, you're talking about, which is the path that the philosophers have taken, I don't see that as being some kind of a path against goodness, path against virtue. It's the path that's pro-virtue. Could you explain a little bit about what that path is?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The under Pythagorean thought, Stoicism, Platonism, and then when they all kind of merge together in this Neoplatonism or Middle Platonism type of worldview, the idea is to be virtue. The more virtue you, the more you attain virtue, the closer you are to the one. To the highest form of God is just the one, and that was the Neoplatonists talk about theurgy, and it was a sort of a salvific magic of rite, and you're taking part in these processes of being pious, of being honest, of giving to the poor, of treating your family good, of raising your kids good, of being good to your parents. There's a whole list of what's called the Pythagorean sentences. There's a bunch of different lists of like things that you're supposed to do. Very similar to what you find in like the book of Genesis or the Proverbs or something like that. And those things that when you cultivate virtue, you get closer to the one. And they believe that the closer you are to the virtue, the more godlike you can become, the closer to the God you become, and the better of the eternal life you'll have in the lives to come. And then there's the opposite effect where you can actually be transmigrated to a different species of like a snake or something if you just cultivate no virtue at all and do wicked things in the world, and you don't even deserve to be human anymore.
I guess you'd maybe start out being like a chimpanzee or something, and then just like going down the hierarchy. But so what you're talking about, Neil, is the combination of seeking wisdom and virtue, where you don't see them as being mutually exclusive at all, right? Like you see them as being intricate to each other, that the more wisdom you cultivate, the more you're going to be a virtuous person, act virtuous towards others. The people who think that, well, I'm going to get these magical powers, and the ones that abuse them, they're no different than the Saudi princes that arrange these, the Dubai chocolate sessions with all these Russian models. So I'm just saying that
obviously they talk about outward appearances and you looking like you have virtue and you really don't. Being that like. This is very similar to Jesus' idea of being circumcised within rather than outside. There's a lot of these ideas that have a lot of overlap.
Sure.
Philo of Alexandria was a Platonist and a Jew, and a lot of his ideas look like early Christian ideas.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of overlap in these worldviews. But I guess the difference to me is I see the cultivation of this worldview on a large scale produces people. I mean, the only problem is this is it requires education, stuff like that. So like it doesn't really work for everyone on a large scale as much as Christianity does, where Christianity is sort of being a more simple, have faith, go to church, and let God kind of interfere in your life, that type of thing. But I think that it doesn't cultivate as much as a virtuous life if you're just having faith and just hoping to go to the heaven, rather than someone who's actively in this world trying to make a difference on a large scale. If you can actually achieve that on a large scale, I think it would produce a better world.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think that a lot of I think that a lot of the biblical morality that for example Galatians 5, it talks about the fruits of the spirit, right? And it talks about the fruit, the fruits of the spirit are, joyous, they are, they are sharing, caring, giving, they're not resentful. I can't remember off the top of my head. Let me actually pull it up. Galatians 5. I feel like if we followed the Galatians 5 model, I think we'll be pretty good. And what's funny is like when I see, here it is. But the fruit of the fruit of the spirit is joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. What's interesting though, like a lot of the popular Christian accounts here on X is like the total opposite of that, right? Like
Sure.
basically like oh, like F you Jew, like you know what I mean, like kill yourself Jew or whatever the case is, like it's just like it's like the total opposite of like, it's when I see that, like
I agree. I see people like that, and I think that's childish behavior to do. Quiet Jew, like, oh wow, you did something really great. You just told somebody through a keyboard, through a screen, to be quiet. And you can't even, they don't even know what you look like because you're behind, probably most of you are behind some sort of anonymous accounts. That's not virtuous. That's not you're literally like a 12-year-old. Now, that's not the same as saying you shouldn't criticize Israel's government or speak out against genocide or something like that. I'm not talking about that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like childish behavior, trolling people on the internet.
But here's the big question, though. Who do they end up looking up to? I understand the Galatian verse, and that is something that would be great if more people looked up to. But as far as like the actual God, looking up his high score here, if we're going to compare him with like, Stalin and Hitler and Genghis Khan and all those people. So we got Sodom and Gomorrah, that's like 1,000, 3,000 people. And by the way, I'm not counting at all, the flood. So firstborn of Egypt would be around 20,000, 30,000. Pharaoh's army, 2,000. Korah's rebellion, around with the plague, 14,000. The golden calf, that's around 1,000, 3,000. Quail plague, hundreds. Wow, a lot of plagues here. Serpents of the wilderness, death. I'm just going to Assyrian army, 185,000.
What is this for again?
This is the high score death count from God. So like how many people God killed. So if we're talking about direct numeric killings, it would be more than 322,000 people, and indirect war deaths.
I'm just curious. I'm
just getting started. And he's just getting started too.
Yeah, but I'm wondering why. What is this in relation to? Like,
well, it's in relation to people like the Groypers, like the people who are that malevolent. The question is, if they actually look back on the good book, which parts do they decide to follow? Because that could also be said for the history of Christianity, that, some would decide to look at more of the peaceful parts of the Bible, but then others would maybe have enough justification to do a lot of really bloodthirsty and horrible things towards other people because of that same good book. So that's the question of how much is this, if we tally together all of these deaths that have been caused by God, how much? And I know it's kind of a fedora tier argument, but at the same time, if we're like looking at, if we were to compare like the Neoplatonic stuff that Neil was talking about to what people today, like Christians today, are using to, justify their reality, then this is a very violent book at the same time, right?
If I could real quick, I think a lot of people, I think the mistake for that comes in where people start talking about God and from a biblical view, right? The biblical God, Yahweh. I think a lot of people are already assuming something that the Bible never assumes, right? Which is that like God is just another moral agent alongside us, right? Like he's a bigger version of a human ruler, and so his actions should be judged by those same standards. But like biblically speaking, like that's not like the framework at all, right? So like God like isn't a creature, right? In the biblical framework, he's the creator. So everything that exists only has life because he gives it, right? and it all comes from him and it all belongs to him. So when he takes life, he isn't committing murder like a man does, but he's exercising a right that only belongs to him because he is the source of life in the first place, right? So that's the core distinction, right?
Yeah.
So like someone couldn't look at God's actions and then justify whatever they do, trying like, right, because that's why God says like vengeance is not for you, like leave that for me, right? Like vengeance and judgment, like that's for God to do, because he's not another moral agent. You know, like he's not like a bigger human.
Well,
right?
Imagine everything you said right now. Imagine that being said by some African warlord on some desert island, that an explorer happens to land on this island. He sees all these virgins being sacrificed to this fat African guy sitting on a big throne. And he asks him, how are you justified in doing these horrible things, you know, killing these poor virgins? And what does he say? Exactly what you said, Donnie. He says that I'm not a man, I'm God. I could do whatever I want. Who are you to question me? Like, wouldn't that be the same thing?
Not necessarily, because I mean, because he would have to say that he's God.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So
why should I believe him?
Because
I guess what you're getting at is like Plato's deducting through reasoning how to get a perfect one. And he's coming up with this God in Timaeus that is perfect, all-knowing, created the world, and through him ascends the good. And you think about that and you go, okay, this God has need of nothing, because if you need something, there's a flaw in there.
Right.
And so when I'm comparing that, when I'm using that as like a way to measure, and I can kind of come to that same conclusion using my reasoning, deductive reasoning. And I'm looking through and I'm reading the scripture about Yahweh, who claims to be, or the claim is not him claiming, the writers of the scripture are claiming that this is the one, that this is the one true top of the food chain God. But it's acting in the world with needs and wants, and has emotions
Desires
and feelings, and saying I'm jealous and repenting and saying I have to deduct from that and go, well, this can't be the one. This is just another spirit, maybe above my spirit, maybe not mortal, but another spirit on par with, you know, Aphrodite, Dionysus, whatever,
or Zeus.
These other conflicting powers that are in, you know, the terrestrial, celestial daemons that are out there. So that's how I see it. I haven't seen anybody come forth and produce a really strong case that the God of the Old Testament is this perfect and all-knowing one.
One other thing, by the way, to add to that, and by the way, I apologize as this is kind of a pile-on. I want to make sure, though, that I get all this out, and then I want to be more gentle, but I want to make sure this all gets out. So if we are comparing Yahweh to these Near Eastern gods, if we are talking about like this more aggressive side to him that, as you, Donnie, said, is justified by him being, the one and only God, it's very similar. Like we have the flood in Atrahasis. And,
we already talked about that.
Yeah, the plagues. We have Baal wiping out huge swaths of life during drought cycles.
You could just skip all that, all the comparative mythology, and just say we find in archaeology Yahweh being worshipped by the Canaanites long before. It just seems to be a local deity there. Like, how does this God become the one? It's a it's a big question.
Inspiring Philosophy has actually a video about this.
I'm sure he does.
I think it's called Yahweh is not a pagan deity.
Oh yeah, that one has some flaws in my opinion, because he kind of argues that Yahweh was always by itself and was never in any of his pantheons, which is just objectively incorrect. I mean, I can point to a piece of archaeology right now from the 9th century BCE where Yahweh and Asherah are side by side.
Side by side, yeah. Because isn't Asherah depicted as Yahweh's wife?
Yahweh's wife. The word Asherah means wife.
Means wife, right?
So it's Yahweh's wife. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly the case that he made, and I'll have to go back and rewatch it. But no, but before we get into
I remember the case he
made.
It was very he just completely ignores. He doesn't even mention the Achared Kundalit Asherad, which is the one I'm mentioning. He doesn't even mention it. He doesn't even acknowledge it, which to me is the whole video is void now. If you don't even have an argument against Kundalit Asherad or Yahweh being worshipped side by side next to other deities, then what are you talking about? The whole point of this video was El is found in Canaanite sources, and El just means God. So we can put that aside as just another El, not the God not the El from the Bible. And then he says Yahweh, and he makes this claim, and Yahweh is always found by himself, and he's a monotheistic God. That's just wrong. So that video is just wrong, by the way. But
that's interesting.
But I'll just to be, if I can be as try to be as fair as possible and not try to be too hard. You can say that for some weird reason, this God Yahweh, whether it be a Canaanite local god or whatever, does sort of through some sort of fate ends up being the god of the entire Western civilization after this Nicene Creed and after they banned paganism and stuff. That is true. So if you're I guess if you're like if you're following pure what's the word what do you call it providence, if you're looking for the God of providence,
right,
you would fall into Yahweh,
right?
But I still think we have to compare what do we mean by perfect and all knowing. Does it match up? So,
there could also be a test in there as well, right? Where it comes to the left hand of God, the being that people would associate with Satan, who was testing Job. There is another alternative interpretation of the book of Job, which is that it was something that may have made certain Jews start to think, wait a minute, why should I actually just blindly follow this guy? And that could be the other mystery within Judaism, where it's not so much about, well, we have to follow this deity no matter what, but Judaism in its history has been full of discussion and argument and questioning, much more than Christianity, mind you, when it comes to a lot of these rabbis fighting about, like these little differences between the verses. And maybe, just maybe...
Well, that's what Christianity does too. They both do that.
They both do that, but... okay, I'm not going to be like a Judeophile over here.
Islam too. Even Islam does that. Even
I
Islam
guess so. There's certain differences, but here's an important distinction, though, that I think within Judaism there has been, Christians would point to this, and that could be like an anti-Semitic thing, that I think there was a spirit of rebelliousness that grew up through Judaism, where people thought, and they started thinking a little bit more, maybe about something like the Book of Job, where who is this entity to tell Job that, how dare you question me? Like, maybe there is something to that, right? Like the idea that it makes people second guess and wonder, wait a minute, why should I blindly obey this deity? And especially now that I'm finding out that he's associated with like all these other nearest Eastern deities that are not that different from him and how he acts, maybe there was something to the challenge that was posed early on that maybe only now we're kind of seeing, being thought about in the minds of, I don't know, I mean, I'm Jewish according to my mom's side, and I'm thinking about this stuff. Maybe other Jews are also thinking about this stuff as well, where maybe if it was just laid out plainly as, well, you have to seek out virtue, like you're saying, Neil, then maybe the challenge wouldn't be there. But the challenge is not to blindly accept. Maybe the challenge is to overcome. Maybe the challenge is to go over the head of the entity that has for so long been completely unquestionable. And maybe the real, let's say, seduction is not to get to sin and doing virtuous things, and
Yeah, I get what you're saying. You're kind of repeating. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
But you understand what I'm saying. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I kind of want to get, and this ties in what you said too, but what you were saying earlier about like how a lot of people, like, how should I put this? Okay, a lot of people only run into like a lot of the problems that you guys are talking about, I think, because, when you're using like Greek philosophical categories to judge like the God of Israel, the God of the Bible, right? You're trying to fit Yahweh into like Plato's idea of a perfect, unmoved, emotionless, being. And I think that when a lot of people see
God act in the Bible, like, you know, when you see God act in Scripture, it doesn't match that presupposed system, right? So I think a lot of people,
But the presupposed system is through the Socratic method of Socrates debating with another person about what is good, how do we get to the good, what is, you know, that type of thing, and that's how and that's what Timaeus is. It's coming up with what is a perfect God and what is the good God based on two people duking it out using reasoning.
Right.
But go ahead.
Gentiles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
Two goyim, right?
Why should they be Jews then?
No. But that's the whole thing.
Wouldn't that be begging the question that there has to be chosen Jews, right? Well, how do we even get to Jews in the first place?
God, and that's the whole thing. It's like the God of the Bible is not, you know, it's under a very different framework than, like, let's say, like, you know, someone trying to reason with God, you know, the people trying to, you know, the Jews trying to reason with God, in, like, let's say, like the ancient Jews versus, like, you know, people, you know, so, you know, Greeks trying to reason God through, like, the Socratic method. Like, you're gonna have two different versions of God. Yeah, exactly. Two very different outcomes, right?
Exactly.
And, like, you know, and to the point, I think that's kind of where, like, a lot of the early Marcionite kind of a lot of stuff came, is like,
yes,
well, if we use these Socratic methods to try to reason and wrestle with God, you know, when we come to these conclusions, we can come to no other conclusion that the God of the Old Testament isn't this, you know, isn't, you know, it doesn't fit this system, right? And, like, you know, it's almost like apples and oranges, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, but, like,
no, I agree with that. I agree with that.
Yeah, 100%. And like a lot of the kind of, like, the core stuff too, like, oh, like, you know, the God, you know, Yahweh in the Bible is like depicted as, like, needy, like he needs certain things, like he needs Moses to, like, build this, like, makeshift altar. He needs them to, like, build this temple. But it's like, you could see it as needy, but you could also see it as relational, right? Like when Yahweh says he's jealous, right? Or when he says that he grieves, or it says that he delights, like, I don't see it as it means it like inherently meaning that he lacks something. Like, you know, to me, I read that and I see that it means, I see that it's pointing to the fact that he's personally involved with creation, right? Like if you look at, like, Plato's idea of God, right? Like I don't think, like, Plato's God could, like, feel anything because, like, emotion implies, like, change, right? You know, you know, and a change would imply, like, I guess you could say, imperfection. You get what I mean?
Right. That's where those logos comes in. It's
right.
Active reasoning unfolding in reality. So that's why it's almost like there's two deities, but they're one. It's almost, you can see a sort of triad or a trinity forming through Plato. And this is why I think the Trinity is interesting in Christianity. But this kind of solves that issue, because how do you? It could just be deism. This God just sets everything forth and everything's already figured out. We're all just kind of walking through this deist. This is why I'm not a deist, because it's just what the hell. We're all just going through life and there's no point. But with Platonism or Pythagoreanism, or, like, this idea of the one, it actually does have interactions with the world through this second principle, which is the logos, reason, and that's this active force in the cosmos.
Yeah,
and Heraclitus describes it as fire. Different people describe it as different things. Some people water, whatever you want. That's all. Like, we can debate all that.
But
stuff.
it's impersonal.
The thing people agree on is that exactly it's personal. It's active in the world, and we can get to it. We can sort of find our way to it through virtue, through different things.
No, but it would still be like an impersonal principle of energy, of order, of logos, whatever you want to call it, while the God of the Old Testament seems to be a little bit more, like we talked about before, like these Near Eastern deities, in almost like a kind of a cute way, where you see him being like this very, almost like a human being in a way.
It's called
anthropomorphic, yeah. But in a way, what if we could actually combine these two in such a way where let's say we imagine the Old Testament God as being nothing more, nothing less than these New Testament, than these Old Testament, nothing more, nothing less than the Sky Fathers from the Bronze Age and earlier. what if it's like your dad, who you kind of fell apart with because he was kind of an asshole, but maybe it's time for you to forgive your dad. That's what Jordan Peterson liked talking about a lot, right? Maybe there is a way that we could forgive like this old guy who tried really, really hard to do, what was best, but obviously made a lot of mistakes and wanted to be kind of a control freak. But maybe there is a kind of ascendance from being able to forgive that kind of a being and maybe working with that being for the betterment of the future. Or am I just talking out of my ass? Is there something there in some kind of a way that we can make peace with these Near Eastern Skyfather type beings that still live with us through these, beings like God of the Old Testament and New Testament?
I don't really know what
or
you
did
mean.
I lose you?
Yeah, I don't really know what you mean by
Donnie, did I lose you too?
Kind of, sort of. I mean, I think I get where you're coming from.
Where am I coming from?
I think what you're trying to say is like, is there like could there be a reckoning point where like basically where we as society say, okay, like maybe that these these gods, that we read about in these ancient texts, like maybe they do have some sort of role in sort of like helping us see something or
okay.
reveal something to us.
And if I can answer that real quick, I would say yes. That's what the muse is. The muse is this active agent that influences us through poetry, through history, through scripture, especially the Sibylline Oracle. I think that there is this. We call it the muse, but what it is it's actually the thing that connects us to the divine. So that's the muse. So yes, I do think we can be inspired through even Christian scripture. I can probably read Christian scripture and get inspired by God. I think that's a possibility.
But would you, in your mind, imagine this kind of being who is, not like the creator of existence, but is still a pretty powerful guy, and he is somebody who does like being respected and is jealous if you look at, some other entity for inspiration. But this kind of being, I don't know why I keep harping on this particular idea, maybe just imagining like this kind of father and son relationship going on where the father is kind of an asshole and the son, seeks in the end, like he goes away from the father, but then he wants to forgive the father, and he wants to make peace in the household. Are you
talking about the Christian Godhead, the son and the father? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about more of the rougher and tougher Old Testament God.
Yeah,
and
so you're saying that's the father?
That is the father, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's the father who for a long time in humanity has been, I'm sorry, Donnie, but how he treated a lot of people was not that nice. He was very rough. He was very, stubborn as a bunion. You know what I mean? Very stalwart authority figure. And maybe there is something in, like, I'm just trying to find how that kind of entity can be reconciled with. Like, rather than overcoming that entity, maybe there's some kind of a healing process that could happen between us as humans.
Isn't that the point of Jesus on the cross, Donnie? Like, aren't you asking a question that we all already know?
I don't know. Am I? I don't know, Donnie. What do you think? Is Jesus the point here?
Yeah,
of reconciling that asshole God?
Well, that's the whole thing. Is like from a biblical worldview, right? Jesus is everything that Yahweh is, right? Jesus is Yahweh in the flesh, right? Like he's the same God, like Jesus, biblically speaking, right? From a Trinitarian Orthodox point of view, Jesus is the same God who spoke to Moses. Is the same God who made covenant with Israel. It's the same God that did all those things that you didn't like very much. You know what I mean? Is the very, and I feel like there's a lot of okay, a lot of people think that like God in the Old Testament is like very wrathful and all that, and that Jesus in the New Testament is like the opposite, like, right? But like I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that if you really look at the details of it all, right? Yahweh in the Old Testament, is very merciful, and then Jesus in the New Testament is actually very wrathful, right? I mean,
in Revelation, especially
in Revelation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think trying to separate Jesus from Yahweh,
again, like like kind of what like a Martianite would do. I think kind of I think it ignores a lot of the broader context and again, I think a lot of that stuff where it's like, oh, Yahweh's this angry, jealous, wrathful God, and Jesus is the opposite. If you really look and read the text and read about, and read, what actually says, I don't think you'll get that same understanding. Like, where does turn, if someone strikes you on one cheek, turn the other cheek. Where does that come from? It comes from Leviticus. You know what I mean? Loving your enemies, forgiving your enemies, like that all comes from the Old Testament. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
one of the arguments Marcion made that we know explicitly was Elijah being called Baldy, and then these she bears kind of come up and maul these kids and eat them and kill them, and then Marcion's going, Christ would want to save them. It's just kind of what he would say or something like that. And so he kind of made this conclusion that in the Old Testament, he doesn't say that the Old Testament God, this is where everyone gets it wrong. Marcion's not saying that the Old Testament God is completely separate from Jesus, or that this is all an evil God. He's saying he's a ditheist. He thinks in the Old Testament, you're seeing two different spirits going on. You're seeing the God that created the cosmos, and you're seeing the God that gave Moses these laws, and you're seeing the God that did a bunch of stuff that was like good and objectively was good. That's Jesus' Father. And then he's saying, and then there's other parts of the Old Testament where something else is happening, and he's like, that has to be something else. That has to be some other God. That's not the Father of Jesus. And that's where I just want to clarify. Marcion's more of a ditheist in that sense, but he is still saying that the Old Testament God is Jesus' Father. He's not. Marcion is saying that. So everyone, a lot of people think that Marcion didn't have an Old Testament or something. It's not true.
I mean, look at Alexander the Great, for instance. He did a lot of great things for humanity, and at the same time, he killed one of his best friends, in a fit of rage, and he also murdered a lot of people. So, being on top is never easy. Once, the crown's on your head, power corrupts, ultimate power corrupts ultimately, and that's why, at least that's how I look at God right now. I look at him as a kind of leader figure, who led these people through the desert allegedly and created a kind of society that could withstand itself from, various enemies. And so it worked out with him. As far as whether or not he's good or more virtuous than, I got this book over here, thanks to Neil. Neil, I'm looking forward to reading.
That's a classic right there.
And it goes back to the question of, if we're just talking about, good Christians who live their lives, take care of their family in the best way that they can, and that's it. Maybe that's all there is to it. Maybe there's no need to go anywhere further. But then there is the question, again, to talk about a bit before we conclude, the Great Awakening, for the people who actually are curious about what exactly is beyond the veil. If it is also accompanied by virtue, then, and this is a question to Donnie, then why can't it work? And if the answer has to do, well, it's not part of, what God of the Old Testament wants, then again, to me, that triggers the reaction of, well, why does that even matter? If it's just because he's the one who gets to decide, then it doesn't seem like a great way of going about life. But I don't know. Donnie, what do you think about that question of awakening with virtue?
Yeah, I mean, I like the phrase, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Mm-hmm. And every atrocity in the world can be traced back to a guy thinking that he was probably saving somebody or saving the world or doing something good, right? Mm-hmm. And the line between a good intention and a bad outcome is a very thin one, looking at human history, right? And just how things have sort of occurred over the course of the lifetime of the planet or whatever. But again, I think when we look at from a biblical point of view, and we look at the strong delusion and all that, who does it say? Who does the Bible say sends the strong delusion? Satan? the demons. No, it says that God sends it. It says God sends the strong delusion so that people will believe the lie because they did not believe the truth. So that as to, and again, that there's that idea of judicial hardening again, right? Where, because these people are aligned in this way, God gives them over to delusion to be used as a vessel of his judgment. And that's essentially what I believe all of these people who are like, on the red pill path right now, who are just like, who think that they're awakening to the control matrix of the world, and think that they're exposing the dark rulers of the world and the authors of human history, right? But like really, what's happening is, they because of the state of their hearts, because of because of their pride and not relying on God, trying to sort of write their own destiny in the stars, right? Which is a very common theme that we talked about earlier. Because of this, God is going to use their pursuits, to accomplish his purpose. And what's that going to be? That's going to result in them being raised up as vessels of wrath, as instruments of judgment against the Jews, against Israel, right? Against Jacob, right? And that's how God is going to cleanse Jacob from ungodliness. Like I think it's Zechariah 13, 14, 12. One of those says, oh no, it's Romans 11. Yeah, where I will cleanse Jacob from ungodliness when I take away their sins. Right, exactly. And how is he going to do that? Just like Zechariah 13 says, through the trials of fire. Right. And that's essentially what I believe is coming. That's what I believe this great awakening will ultimately culminate into a sort of global crusade against the Jews, seeing them as the human agents of Satan's agenda and seeing Jerusalem as sort of the headquarters of Satan's kingdom. Right. And so it's kind of interesting. So you've got like sort of the sort of awakened Gnostic truthers, as I call them, who say that the Great Awakening is the world waking up against Yahweh and his human agents and his human agents, the Jews, and then you've got like your Christian crusader dominionist types who say the Great Awakening is humanity waking up to Satan and his chosen people, the Jews, right? So functionally, they're both fighting the same war. Right? Functionally, it's just that, the Christians are calling Yahweh Satan without realizing it. You see what I'm saying? And the Gnostics are overtly saying it. Right? So it's a very interesting dynamic, because it's essentially humanity, trying to declare for themselves what is good and evil. Right? And then binding themselves together, against it in a fight to, to preserve their earthly paradise, right? And so, it is very interesting looking at what's going on, especially from like this biblical like worldview, and like seeing the pattern with how like the same way God raised up vessels of judgment before, right? And like that pattern happening again. So.
Could you elucidate a little bit when you're talking about Great Awakening, other than people talking about Yahweh and the Jews, what actually comes with the pride? Are we talking about wanting to have certain magical abilities, wanting to colonize the stars? Like, what exactly would that be?
I mean, a lot of that can definitely bleeds into it, but essentially it's that same thing that we see in the garden, where it's that story of man trying to have total autonomy for themselves and to, like I said, to sort of shape their own destiny, to write their own story, so to speak. And and what's funny is, for most people, that's not really, it's like, well, how's that a bad thing? Like, how is that, most people hear that and say, well, isn't that great? Isn't that awesome? Well, it's like, and that's the whole thing is like, from a biblical point of view, right, that's sort of the same mentality that kind of Lucifer had, right? You know, he wanted to ascend beyond the stars, and he wanted to,
Yeah.
it's a very so what I guess my point here is what mankind calls good and evil is not what God, or at least the God of the Bible, calls good and evil.
I understand. I understand what you're saying. I'm just not clear when it comes to a lot of people, because a lot of people tend to follow certain trends. You know, like there's a reason why we have the term slop. I know it originated, people talking about goy slop and things of that nature. But when we think of slop, we think something that's engineered for the masses to consume, including something like the Great Awakening. So for somebody who would be like an avid slop consumer, you know, who thinks that the Jews have ruined everything, what would the Great Awakening look like to them? And again, I'm not talking about like some philosopher, artist, whatever, you know, just like some regular Joe.
Yeah, the awakening to that guy would be like, you know, that the world, you know, is united against the Zionists, right? You know,
okay, and then what? What's part two after
part
the world
is
is
the global crusade on Jerusalem?
Okay, what happens after? Okay, forget.
Think most people in the world are thinking in terms of what is like the end. The end game is just like that's such an online thing that everyone's just thinking about. Are you pro?
Yeah, no one's thinking. Yeah.
Most
I'm not
people
saying,
are not really thinking that way.
No.
Yeah, what's going to happen with Qatar and like these various?
Most people aren't thinking that way at all. No, most people are thinking in very, very surface level terms, and that's the whole thing. It's like there's so many different flavors of the same deception packaged for every single group, right? Like right now, like I sit and I think about how every group has their own version or their own flavor, let's say, of the Great Awakening, and has their own sort of role to play in it. It's really interesting to kind of like take an overview look at. But none of these people are rubbing their hands together and saying, yeah, we're gonna take Jerusalem, right? Like,
but a lot of them are just kind of question begging based on their upbringing.
Yeah,
they're Islam. They believe in Islam because they grew up in Islam. They believe in Judaism because they believe in Judaism. They're Baptists because they're Protestant. They're this because they grew up in it. And how you don't really. What I'm not seeing is I'm not seeing people put aside their thing they grew up in and just start to actually think deeply about these things from a position of starting at square one. Pretend you don't even know anything about religion. You know nothing about God. You never even read the Bible. And let's think about this thing from fresh. I see no one doing that.
Yeah. So, for instance, one person who I definitely see doing that is Jason, our good friend Jason Resider Johnny, where he sees the awakening as being a time when humanity can start. And again, when he says humanity, it's not all humanity. It's actually going to be like really, really small amount of people. You know, humanity figuring out how to maximize their creativity. So for him, a lot of what life is all about is maximizing one's creativity. I would also add, like, I don't want to speak for Jason here, but I would definitely not say that he is not a virtuous person. He is a virtuous person from what I, had in my interactions with him. And that kind of virtue, you know, like being a good person to others, helping others, that is something that if I were to imagine the logical conclusion of somebody who would start out thinking, okay, I've cracked the code in the Matrix, I figured out how to get the seed he's, how to get these magical superpowers, I can teleport, I could fly like Dragon Ball Z, I could do all this stuff. Now what? What, am I going to become like the ruler of the universe and, you know, punish all these people, do all these, you know, bad things to people? Or do I do good things to people? Like at a certain point, that kind of knowledge should accompany with it, you know, if you are not just like a human robot calculator, you know, sadist, if you are like somebody who develops some kind of an inner light, whatever you want to call it, virtue, I think, follows that. This is where I think I disagree with you, Donnie, that I don't see the cultivation of wisdom and the cultivation of virtue as being separate, like I was talking before with Neil. But you see them as being separate unless you're specifically going according to what the Old Testament, New Testament say you should do.
Well, I guess that begs the question, like what wisdom are we talking about, right? Because like the serpent offered wisdom, right?
Sure.
When they rid of the tree of knowledge, did the serpent lie when he said that their eyes would be opened? No, it says explicitly, and their eyes were opened, and they did receive knowledge of good and evil, right? But like again, like that what the question has to be asked, from where are we getting this wisdom, right? Like I could say that the teachings of Helena Blavatsky are full of wisdom, right?
Or Zoroaster.
A lot of these like sort of channeled works, right?
Yeah.
I could say, well, this is such great wisdom. Let's use this wisdom as a model for our earthly life living or whatever, right? But like again, from a biblical point of view, that would be like the ultimate evil, right? Is to essentially follow doctrines of spirits, right, that differ from the Bible, and
even if they cultivate the same kind of virtue, even if they encourage you to do things like helping your grandma with her groceries, like that's what I don't understand here.
I mean, that's the thing. Like anyone, a terrorist can hold the door open for somebody and go in and blow up the bank, right? Like,
well, no, but then we're making assumptions that Blavatsky or Rudolf Steiner followers would be doing the kind of things that Al Qaeda does, which is not the case. If we're talking about like the Aristotelian, but this is important. If we're talking about the Aristotelian good life, right? Like the idea that it's the entirety of a life, like how you led it and how you developed yourself during your chance of being, born as this human being entity here, what exactly amounts to that experience? If at the end of the day, that experience has been in the majority helping your grandma out with her groceries, being a good son, being a good father, helping raise your kids well, while also maybe acquiring certain knowledge about, I don't know, how do you teleport from one place to the other, or how could you have like lucid dreams and, because think about...
That's the thing. Yeah. You're defining, that's exactly what the Bible talks about, is you're defining good and evil for yourself.
But that's philosophy. That's how people acquired virtue through philosophy versus through revelation. So the question here is,
right, and that's the ultimate question: is how exactly? And that's the question the Bible asks: is how do we wrestle with God? Do we wrestle with God through reason, through human reasoning, through philosophy, through these things, or through revelation, or through the revelation? Through the scriptures, and that's ultimately the dividing line. Like what you were hitting on right here is the dividing line.
And but then both ways lead to a new dyad, I guess, because like if you go with philosophy, then you're asking like, what is good, what is virtue, what are those things, and then you go off into two different directions. But then if you go with revelation, then you might end up in the question of, well, which revelation is it? Is it the revelation that Simon Magus got, or is it the revelation that Paul got? Is it the revelation that, you know what I mean? And then it's like, which Christianity is true? And then you go in two different directions there. And a lot of times it ends up being like, the one that you grew up with, or the one that's the most popular, the
Crips
one that
versus the Bloods.
Yeah. So I guess there's just, I don't know, there's questions on everything. Every avenue we go down, we're going to be you're going to have to appeal to authority at some point. You're going to have to beg the question at some point. There's something some sort of fallacy that you're going to run into.
But this is a very important thing, I think, for us to consider. I'm very happy indeed that we got to this point of understanding, where it's not just about, some conspiracy-minded dullards thinking, that they're going to get rid of, their enemies, the Jews, and then life is going to be, marshmallows and candy canes. This is about trying to figure out how much this revelation is important to the grand scheme of things versus the revelations being something that, if let's say it did exist, one version of events could say that these revelations were put here to have people do things according to a certain system, but maybe it wasn't to save them, maybe it was to control them for that period of time, and maybe wrestling with God, as you yourself just said, Donnie, is trying to figure out that, maybe I should go beyond just blindly obeying. Because, again, to me, if I look at, let's say, the worst of the worst, which would be, I don't know, for example, like pre-MBS Saudi Arabia, where people, they would get their hands chopped off for stealing, which that probably happens right now still. And yeah, maybe they have a safe society where nobody steals because of that. But if the reason why you don't steal is because you're afraid of your hand getting chopped off, that's better. I mean, that's worse than a Christian not stealing because he's afraid that he's going to go to hell. At least his hand's not going to get chopped off today, at least. I don't know, back in the Middle Ages, he probably was in the stockade for a bit. But the point here is that it's still part of this whole God as the police type mentality, which I think a lot of people have. People imagine God as the police, and if they misbehave, then the police are going to punish
Did you not steal
them.
because you thought through why stealing is bad, or did you not steal because God said so? That's a good question.
Yeah.
Something to think about.
Well, let's go to super chats over here. So we already did Deadpool Kid 12, the first one, but there is another one from Deadpool Kid 12. One thing I'll say is be careful trying to find the Antichrist, because from Nero, Napoleon, to even U.S. presidents were considered to be the one. This is just a common cycle of who, what, where, why, when.
An Antichrist in every generation. You're right.
Yeah, we both talked about how there's more than one Antichrist. That's pretty biblically, that's very clear in the Bible.
Yeah. And I'm sure some people have such a wonderful aunt, an aunt that they call her the Antichrist, but in a good way. She's Christ-like. Anyway, oh man, I gotta have kids soon, and I gotta be a dad already because they just keep coming. Okay, Andre P 9378, $50 Polish, which apparently amounts to the same as like $10 in American.
Really?
I love
the
Poland.
Inflation's that high there, huh?
Well, I actually am curious about this. By the way, listen, guys, if you're watching this right now for the very first time, smash that subscribe button right now. Click the like button. That's also very important. And click the goddamn bell, because that's going to get the notifications coming in. I hope to do an episode with Jason Giorgiani again very soon. We're just discussing the date that's going to be occurring. And also, guys, I cannot wait until you see the short, or the clip rather, that I've been creating this whole week. This is Neil from the episode of BTR NYC, which you did with me and our good friend Steph Uber Boyo. So I don't know if you got a chance to see the screenshot, the recent screenshot that I put up here on Twitter. I just want to quickly share this right now. One second. Just here we go. Yeah, and also, by the way, patreon.com/breaktherules. That is also very important that you guys go there, support the show, and when we do another BTR NYC, or when we do a Giorgiani episode, because those are usually on Patreon first, if you are a patron, you're going to be able to watch it live and ask questions and all of that good stuff. But anyway, here I wanted to quickly show you guys. Let me just add the share screen here. Here we go. So I wanted to show you guys this screenshot over here from the masterpiece that I am working on right now.
Nice.
If you notice the background over here, this is from the video game Earthbound, if you guys ever played it, for the Super Nintendo system. This was the final level of Earthbound. What I'm showing you, by the way, here, this just like scratches the surface of what is going on in this video. Here's a head of Carl Jung. He was speaking in tongues and he was like screaming out. There's so many celebrity cameos in this video. There's Shadow the Hedgehog. He makes a really big appearance. Nice. There's Conquer the Squirrel, who was based on just like Neil saying the word conquer. So I put in, thanks to AI, you could do pretty much anything. I put in Conquer the Squirrel in there, wearing like a helmet from the Wehrmacht. And there is so much, I can't even begin to describe how much stuff is put into this video. It should be coming out next week. I'm almost done with it. It's the one that talks about Hitler and Norse mythology and how Wotan is this spirit of frenzy. In fact, his name means, or Odin, Wotan means Lord of the Frenzy, and how people like Adolf Hitler, for instance, end up getting possessed by this Wotanic Dionysian spirit in order to, have more violence and bloodshed, but like create an army of like the greatest warriors and yada yada yada. So I don't know. That would be, I guess, not in the realm of virtue, right, Neil? That would be in the realm of like how would you classify something like that?
Oh, that's too complex for that. Would take me forever. Let's get on with the super chats.
Okay. Here we go. Let's continue with poor Andre P here. And not poor, by the way. How much is... I'll look it up after I read. What value does it have matching current events with ancient myths?
Oh, I think it's got a lot of value. I think.
Oh yeah.
I mean, why not?
Yeah,
We're drawing from the muse when we do stuff like that. That's the muse of history, Cleo.
that's true.
I believe in that.
Yeah, you remember Miss Cleo?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a lady who was faking a Jamaican accent, who was reading
that's right.
the fortunes of people for a phone. Probably pretty expensive. By the
Yeah.
way, 50 Poland dollars is 13.60 US dollars. Once again,
Nice.
I really appreciate the amount. I don't want to denigrate it. I just wanted to show it, just the comparison of money here. Anyway, next one from Tales of the Levant. In Matthew 16:28, Jesus makes it even more explicit by saying,
Yeah, we talked
some
about that one.
here will not taste death. Yes.
Yeah, we went over that. That was,
yes.
that was a big chunk of the episode. But
Another one. Read the verses before Matthew 16:28. Whoa, what happened to the lights?
good. I'll fix
Shut
it.
up
Keep
the
going.
lights. Okay, read the verses before Matthew 16:28. It makes it even more obvious that it's not about the transfiguration. Any thoughts on Matthew 16:28?
I gotta pull it up. 16:28.
Yes, 16:28. Here we go. Truly I say to you, there are some who are
Yeah, we did that
yes. Oh, yeah. Okay, let's move on. We keep on running into the same one, and that's, by the way, the same guy here. Yeah, man, what's going on? But I appreciate it.
Maybe he probably put that in before.
Probably, yeah.
Before we talked about it.
Yes. Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Tales from the Levant. It's so funny, Tales from the Levant. Reminds me of Tales from the Crypt. Anyway, thank y'all for this stream. Question for Gnostic. Ever thought about making some videos on early Judaism and Christianity?
it's like,
Who are these people? One of them asks if you're a Christian. One of them asks if you're a Christian. The other one, I think they're trolling you.
Okay. they got me on that one. I thought it was serious at first. Yeah.
All right, next one. A straight shot, $5. The current year of the Hebrew calendar is 5,786, and their Messiah is supposed to be back by 6,000. Where did this 7,000-year calendar come from?
If you look at the Jewish calendar, they like take out a lot of like stuff. I don't know like off the top of my head all the historicity of that, but like look into. Here's what I would do. I would. If you're really interested in what I'm talking about and the whole like 6,000 year timeline, whatever, I would recommend watching Messiah 2030. There's 3 parts. It's like 6 hours. It's like a 6-hour watch in total. If you're interested, check it out.
I know in the Talmud though, 2239 is one of the year, if not, from I think it's the Mishnah, I think, but there's a Talmud passage that it's like 200 years from now. We still have a long way to go.
Yeah, the Jewish calendar, like from what I understand, they're like missing some like key events or something. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what it is. But if you're interested
for some reason, they end up around 2,239.
200, yeah. But yeah, watch Messiah 2030. I think
I'll definitely check it out. I definitely want to check that out. Isaac Newton predicted 2060, by the way. So, and that's a pretty smart man right there.
That
He
is a
said
smart man.
260. So, something to think about.
Although I think I had this feeling that Isaac Newton was more of a Christian because of the sort of social, a lot of the social pressure at the time.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean,
He definitely believed in something, though. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, next and last super chat over here of the day from 160 Grande, $9.99. Virgin Sophia, wisdom before truth, conceived logos via muthos, devil/myth, the matrix, mother's womb. Court philosophers cited devil for power, princess in tower. Logos went to church instead of wisdom.
Wow. That's an interesting, very Gnostic point of view there.
There we go. And by the way, where else you guys can get some of this very interesting wisdom is by going to the BTR Discord. I always fail to promote the Discord because I can never get my hands on the link in the right time. Here it is. Here's the link for all of you guys. I posted in the chat. So I know some of you Discord heads out there, you want to continue the conversation. So go to Discord. And
I
once
should probably
again,
start doing more Discord stuff.
yeah, well, people have been asking, "Where's Neil? Where's Neil? We want to talk to Neil. What's going on?" So yeah, you gotta get back on the Discord, and also Patreon.com/break the rules. Like I said before, New York City, Mamdani's in. Nothing we could do about that for now.
By the way,
So,
for a future Donnie episode, we can do what me and Inspiring Philosophy did, where we just come into the conversation assuming Christianity is true.
Okay.
And we only start with this. The only assumption we start with was Jesus was the Messiah.
Uh-huh.
We're not even going to say he's God or whatever. We're not
Yeah.
even going to go to level of divinity, and that he died and resurrected. That's it.
Oh,
And then
wow.
we can sort of meet. What the point of the discussion was. Who's right? Are the Gnostics correct? Are the Orthodox correct?
Oh, yeah, that's
Is
a
the
good one,
Ebionites
yeah.
correct? And we can sort of have that. Yeah.
Is that the discussion you guys had?
Yes.
Oh, I got it. I got it.
I
And
didn't
we can
land
use,
on any particular Gnostic. I wasn't like going in with Team Marcion, but I was more of going in with questioning his epistemic. Like, why do you know that the Orthodox? Why do you know Trinitarianism is correct? How do you know Marcion wasn't right about this? How do you know? And it was kind of a fruitful discussion, I think.
Oh, wow.
Was
And
that
we
with
could
you?
use,
Was that with you, Lev?
I don't think it was. Well, maybe. Let me take a look with Inspiring
It might have been
Philosophy.
with you, yeah.
Yeah, it might have been. And by the
Yeah.
way, will this book also be useful for the discussion?
Oh hell yeah! That's a huge that's what
Yeah.
you're holding right there is a whole bunch of primary sources that were translated by G.R.S. Mead in the early 20th century, and it's basically a lot of early Gnostic texts. Like you have the Nicene Preacher document in there. You have a lot of Plato in there. You have a lot of the Hermetic, the Hermetics religious stuff in there. What else is in there? There is a lot of Mithraism stuff in there. Early Christians. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. That's a whole huge chunk of
Thrice-
different sources.
Thrice Greatest Hermes for those listening in audio.
Yeah, that's
and by
worth
the-
having in your library.
Yeah.
For sure.
By G.R.S. Mead. And tell
One of
us
the greatest scholars of the 20th century, and Carl Jung is deeply indebted to him. By the way, a lot of the translations of the early Gnostic text that we got from Nag Hammadi was originally translated by that guy, G.R.S. Mead.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's one of the original. Yeah.
And can you tell us
And
real
by the way,
quick
look at-
what's
read-
going
go-
on here?
Go up so I can see the title. You can't see the title.
Here we go.
Studies in Hellenistic Theosophy and Gnosis. He's one of the first people to bring back the term Gnosis as something that's like a philosophical concept in the modern world. Like that was like a dead concept for a long time. He kind of revived it. Theosophy, and I don't really use that term. He uses it, but
Yeah.
And what is the illustration here, by the way? What's going on with this guy and the
that's
dragon
Simon
thing?
Magus fighting Peter.
Wow.
So Simon Magus is in the sky. Peter is striking him down with his magic.
Man,
He's like
they really should make like a Final Fantasy type game out of this, like an RPG. Imagine if somebody made an RPG of like all of this, like the Old Testament, the New Testament, like all the Gnostic stuff added in there. That would be
Yeah,
that would
that'd
be
be
a hell of an RPG.
Yeah.
You could even play as
That
Jesus.
would be,
and- All right, guys. This is a great show. As always, Donnie, Gnostic, I really enjoy you guys coming. And by the way, Donnie, if you ever want to finally put yourself out there in the flesh, we could maybe do a show in New York City. So let me know, like whenever you feel like it's the right time. My door is definitely open. So it's in New York City. And like I say before, if you become a patron, patreon.com/breaktherules, $20 patronage means that you are going to be able to be in the room with us recording the show. You're going to get to see the show before anybody else does if you're a patron in general. But the goodies from being a $20 plus patron is that you get to hang out with us after the show as well, not just watch it. We usually have an after party like in the rooftop. I've got a rooftop. You've been there, Neil, so you can testify as a witness.
Oh yeah, definitely a nice New York City place you got going over there.
And you guys are all invited. And yeah, that's that. What do you guys have coming up?
I have a few projects. Tomorrow I'm going live at Flint Dibble to talk about Elon Musk's take on the fall of Rome. So that'll be
Nice.
fun. Just a historical video. Nothing really theological there.
And Donnie?
Me? No, I mean not a whole lot. The big updates with me come from the news site, like what's going on, what more developments we have, since my whole thing's kind of based off of what I think is like, unfolding. So,
real quick before we go, and we already, do you think, as far as like the whole Israel thing, is it heating up? Is it what's going on there?
Because, I think so. Yeah, I think so, 100%. Yeah. I think we're gonna see like some very big developments. I think the next biggest, like big thing we'll see is the third temple coming soon.
Yeah.
I think.
I heard they already got the heifer ready and all that.
No, that heifer didn't work out. They found the blemish on it.
Yeah. Well, so there's so much conflicting information, and I think it's that way on purpose because
Lev would know. He's part of the Jewish family. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right.
The funny thing is, though, that so many Jews, they don't give a rat's ass about any of this stuff. By the way, like a lot of like the early Zionists, they were not religious at all. Like they just didn't like their families getting massacred by drunken, Russian peasants. So, like you can't blame them. So they wanted to be a part of Western civilization. They wanted to, get to the same level as, the WASPs and all that, but they were rejected. So they thought, okay, let's just do our own thing. Let's have Israel. So it's funny, right? Because a lot of people think of Israel as being like this religious ethnic state, but it's like super liberal, and a lot of people there, including, I'd hazard a guess. I'd say most of the Jews are not even that religious at all. Like it's just like it's an identity. They have like little parties.
That's how Catholics are, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a lot of the most established religions have that sort of culture going on, where there's everyone just like, well, I'm just part of this flock, and that's it. I don't really care.
Yeah, they just chill out. But the other thing is that Israel, it's very different with the Arab nations now than it was in its inception. Because remember, like in the very beginning, all the Middle Eastern nations were at war with it. But now we got the, yourself, Donnie, like we have the Abraham Accords. Egypt has peace with Israel. So does Jordan. So does the Emirates. So does Saudi Arabia now. So, like, at least right now, maybe this is the calm before the storm. I don't know, but so far it's actually like it's not the worst situation.
Things up. Maybe that's going to happen.
I guess, but like the guy was like an in-between man for multiple people, including Khashoggi, who was like part of this family of these Turkish, Saudi Arabia living weapons dealers. So, just like before him, you had Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, who allegedly worked for Mossad, MI5, and the Soviet Union. And he was like the go-between man, according to Ari Ben Menash, who wrote this tell-all book. But he was working for Mossad, and he wrote a tell-all book, which did not get appreciated by Mossad. But to me, it's like if that guy's a spook, spooks lie all the time, right? So why would I trust what a spook's got to say? But who knows? Like if we were to give him the benefit of the doubt, he basically talks about how, and I know like this is extending, but I just want to quickly share. He talks about how Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, he brought, I didn't get to that part, but from what I understand, he knew Epstein, and they had a relationship, and I believe he was brought in, and Epstein also worked at the Dalton School as a teacher, and he was brought in there by Donald Barr, who was working in the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, and who was the father of Bill Barr, who, if you remember, was the attorney general during Trump's first administration, who released Epstein. That. Yeah, but lastly, just to make a long story short, Robert Maxwell allegedly had like this Israeli spy software installed on the spy software he was selling to governments to spy on their own citizens. Isn't that a funny coinky dink, right? Anyway, it was called Promise, Promis. And with that, guys, where could people find you? Donnie, where can people find Donnie?
On X, Donnie Discerned.
There we go. And Gnostic Informant, where could people
X
find you?
and YouTube, Gnostic Informant, X and YouTube. Those are the main two.
And you guys could find me on X at LevPo, LEVPO. And as always, patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a member, subscribe, add a like, go to Discord. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you later. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
See ya.